Um, I guess, Jeff, will you call the roll, please? No, we need to do.
Councillor Peetzold.
Here.
Councillor Smallwood. Okay, Councillor Hamblin.
Excused, both excused. Yep.
Okay, Councillor Lee.
Here.
Councillor Axner.
Here.
Councillor Schultz.
Here.
Mayor Pulliam.
Here. All right, we'll go through our agenda for this evening, and then we'll have our conversation for our work session tonight on our facility assessment and space needs analysis. So tonight, obviously, we've got the minutes on our consent agenda. Do we have any questions from anything that appeared on that agenda? Corrections? Okay. Then under new business, we have several items tonight, most of which we've talked about in previous discussions. Remember, this is not to talk about them at this moment, but if we have any questions or want to give any indications for research to staff going into tonight, please speak up. So the first one is our Ordinance 2020-11. It's approving the annexation of the property and right-of-way. Is there any questions on that? Okay, we got our Ordinance 2020-14, amending the section for the Sandy Municipal Code, talking about the system development charge changes that we're making. Was there any questions before that tonight? Okay, and then Resolution 2020-15, adding Gunderson Road and Olson Street to our city transportation systems plan. Any clarifying questions for that?
Not at this time.
And then finally, Ordinance 2020-13, amending our municipal code as it relates to annexations. And we do have written testimony that has appeared on our agenda if you haven't seen that yet. Is there any questions on that?
Is that the Kathleen Walker?
I think in addition, there's one by Tracy Brown and a couple others.
Oh, right.
I think we might have 10 or so pieces there. Yep.
10. Oh, okay. I haven't seen them all then.
Yeah. Then we'll go to our report from Jordan, and then our committee and counselor reports, and then we'll adjourn for the evening. With that, let's go into our work session discussion for our facility assessment and space needs analysis. Tyler, Jordan, whoever on staff, take it away.
It's Tyler, so I'll let him do his own introduction and take it away. He led this project, which was a goal for us for this past year, and an item that was budgeted and approved by council to complete a facilities assessment of the condition of all our public facilities, and at the same time also look at doing a space needs analysis, recognizing that, you know, there's been a lot of talk about the constraints that we have at City Hall and some other facilities, future plans for Operations Center, obviously the issues with the community center, and also the opportunities to better use the assets at the community campus, such as a bunker building. So those two projects were combined into a facilities assessment and space needs analysis that was completed here, I think, after several drafts a couple months ago. And the purpose of tonight, Tyler's going to walk you through, summarize the report, see if you have any questions, and kind of talk about how these get incorporated into future plans and considerations as we sort of develop plans for our facilities, such as a campus, and also start investing more in our public facilities, such as the thing you did a couple weeks ago, addressing one of the major needs with the senior centers. What did we call that? The portico? Let's call it the portico repair. So I'll turn it over to Tyler.
All right. Well, good evening, Council. I am very happy to have this project in front of us to actually finally discuss it. It's been a long haul. Started in August of last year, and multiple site visits and interviews with department heads and staff within each building to really get a well-rounded representation of the areas we need to improve and maintain. So first and foremost, I'll just say that, you know, the information that we have in this report is going to help us build a really robust capital improvement plan for all of our city facilities going forward. And Jordan and I hope to have that developed before the next budget cycle, so we can have a nice, clear document to show us in 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, what projects we have, how we need to prioritize those, and make sure that our buildings stay in a really nice state of repair. During the process, the consultant identified 242 different assets throughout the 10 buildings that we have, and those assets range from windows and plumbing to roofing and HVAC systems, kind of the whole wide range of anything you could think of within the building or attached to the building. Of those 242 assets, 144 of them are in great or good condition, not requiring any sort of upkeep or dollars in the near future. There are 47 assets that need significant repair in the short term. Some of those assets are found in each location. So City Hall, for example, needs, still new windows on 3 sides of the building. We had an extensive rehab on the south side, thanks to Kelly and his team, but there's still another 3 sides that need to be repaired with windows and some other siding issues. There's plumbing and gutter problems as well at City Hall, and I think we can all agree on something we've talked about at length in the past: security cameras and alarm systems kind of across the board for many of our facilities either need to be updated or just added in general. City Hall being, a significant one with the infrastructure that we have here. We want to make sure that that's obviously kept safe for SandyNet. Of all the maintenance and repairs that need to be done, it's a little over $10 million over 30 years. And I will share my screen quickly with you to show you kind of what that looks like over a 30-year period. Everyone see this section okay? Hopefully, yes. Okay. So you can see that, some years are much more than others, and this is going to really help us create that capital improvement plan so that we can prioritize our funds each budget cycle. In year 1 and 2, you're close to $1 million. The thought process within this is that it uses the remaining life. So if something has a remaining life of 1 year, it doesn't mean it's going to necessarily fail in 1 year, but we want to start looking at it's going to fail in the short term. It might be 3 years from now, but let's start prioritizing that. So some of these items include, furnaces, water heaters, things like that, that individually don't cost a lot of money, but when you go and replace the entire, HVAC system or plumbing system, that's where you start seeing those dollars add up. And in some cases, it makes sense just to replace that one furnace or that one water heater. In other buildings, it makes more sense to repair the entire system because there's so many individual pieces that don't have useful lives that are very long by themselves. And so it just makes, fiscally much more sense to go in, rip it out, and repair the whole thing. This visual here, you will notice, looks very similar to the one that was in the staff report. And it lists out each asset individually. Red meaning it is a high priority, a combination of multiple things. It could either be near failing, it could be very expensive, and so therefore it needs to be prioritized, ahead of other things because it's going to cost so much money to repair it. Also, the consultants weighted a public sort of impact factor. So, City Hall is a more public-facing building, so some of those items are a little more heavily weighted than, say, I'm making up a location at the moment, but like the bus wash station. Yes, we want our buses clean, but if City Hall failed completely, how could we continue to conduct business versus if a bus wash failed, we could still limp by for a little while to get that repaired. So all of those factors are compiled into this colorful chart for you to see. These red assets are definitely the ones that we want to start taking care of more quickly than others. However, some of them don't make sense to take care of yet because we don't know what we're going to do with the buildings. A good example of that is the SandyNet location, or the bunker building, annex building, however you want to refer to it as. Probably don't want to go in and pour a bunch of money in HVAC and plumbing and windows in a building that we don't know how we're going to use it yet. So it's easy to kind of push those off for a little bit longer and have a better idea of what the plan is for that site. Some of these other items, though, that do need looking at: community services. So This one, roofing and gutters. This is not the portico that Jordan mentioned or that we talked about last meeting. This is the actual roof of the building that's going to need some repair in the short term. The portico is currently rated as an orange on this chart, and the reason for that is because if it fails, the building is still usable. So the impact of that specific asset failing is not as significant as the roof failing. And so that could get a little complicated as we look through this. You know, one thing's an orange, one thing's a red, but we have to kind of take a step back and then evaluate the individual asset to make sure that, you know, the orange one maybe should be bumped up a little bit over a red one because it's an easy win, or because we have some funds available to do a project like that. For example, some facade grant money to help offset the cost of that project. So this is just a tool to sort of guide us, but there's still some discretion that staff and council are going to have to prioritize each of those individual assets moving forward. So I'll pause here for a moment because the next section more talks about the space needs analysis versus the actual facility assessment. And I'd be happy to go in depth on any specific building or asset if council has any questions. Or if you just have general questions or concerns you want to go over, I'm happy to answer those at this point as well.
I have a question. Two questions, actually. One, when you said the IT building there in the red there, are you talking about the bunker building?
Yes, that's correct.
Not necessarily the data center room
Yes.
aspect of a building. So it's really the bunker building they're just referencing as the IT building.
Yeah.
The other question is when things do come off this, I mean, you're using Tableau here. McKinstry put this together for you, it looks like. Are we able to take all the money we spent there and keep this particular data sheet going forward with updating information on it, and so the colors will all change on that for you, or is this just a one snapshot and we'll work for it for a while, but then we'll have to get another one to do that? Are you able to edit this?
Yeah, so that's a great question. This is, as it is right now, just a one snapshot. However, they did provide us with their master Excel file that feeds into this. So we do have the ability to update that master file and re-upload it and maneuver with, maneuver around in it as we go forward. The key to that is just going to be updating, all those dollars, because everything's in 2020 dollars. So when we're looking at this, for the next budget cycle, we'll probably want to add some sort of inflationary factor to have it be relevant, or to make sure that it is relevant. So yes and no is the answer to your question. We have the capability, we just need to do some manpower behind the scenes to make sure it's still functional once we do update it.
I thought I read that the HVAC system in the library had to be replaced, and I was surprised when I read it because I thought that building was fairly new, or newer than most of the others.
Yeah, the same with the police department building as well. And so, I can't speak to the reason as to why that's the case, more so than, unfortunately, the system either isn't large enough to handle the building at its current state, which I think was the police department's problem. I don't have the report in front of me to quote that exact line. The other, issue that I think the library has run into is you add a bunch of bookshelves and, almost make, another 30 walls inside the building that impacts the airflow in there. And so part of the problem too was maybe just placement of vents or the air intake and things like that. And so, it's not necessarily a full rehab of those assets as much as updating or moving them, relocating them to a more appropriate location.
So I assume that you've covered in your 200 and something different facilities, you're putting things in there like the reservoirs and the water towers and that kind of thing. How do you evaluate those importance versus some of the other very important things that we have, like how do you evaluate the difference between repairing something that needs to be done on our water towers versus something to be done that we're doing, need to be doing in like DEQ violations on our sewer plant? How do you determine which is the more important of those?
That's a good question, Councilor Exner. This focused specifically on city buildings that occupy staff. So this does not have reservoirs or water towers or anything like that in it. This is City Hall, library, police department, bunker building, operations center. I don't remember if I just said library or not, so I'll say it again.
No, you did.
And so it's those 10 buildings sort of within city limits, very close in, that staff are utilizing on a regular basis.
So why weren't we considering some of our other facilities that could very well be of crucial importance to get completed, especially some of these older reservoirs that are up on the mountain?
So we just started our water master plan, which is essentially a facilities plan for a water utility. And so that will look at those assets in addition to the condition of our pipes and the treatment plant for just the water utility. And keep in mind too, those come from different funds, right? So the water, rates, the water utility fees, go directly towards the water infrastructure. Whereas this, one of the main reasons that we decided to do the facilities assessment is because we have that facilities maintenance fund, which is a set aside fund that all the departments contribute towards in order to do building improvements and maintenance items on the facilities that Tyler mentioned. So, this other, like I said, the other assets for the utilities, we do our own master plans and facility plans for those separate utilities.
Okay.
So we're working on the plan for the climate action or resiliency, and some of these things have some crossover. Was there anything considered in this plan that would lead to more efficient operation under that kind of a plan that we could directly tie, do you think?
I haven't really, gotten myself familiar with the resilience plan that you and others are working on yet, Councillor Lee, but what I can say is if we're replacing any of these assets, we'd be replacing them with the most efficient option possible. So a new furnace is going to be, that top 98% efficiency gas furnace or something like that. Same with the water heaters and those sorts of items. So I think there's definitely room to collaborate with the resiliency committee to make sure that we have those concerns identified when we go to replace these assets. But there was not, a specific action point for the consultant to include those items in.
So we could just refer to them as when those replacements occur, they would be at a high energy efficient level.
Yep. And we, I don't think that staff would, just from a practical standpoint, choose to replace something with a less efficient option to save, $500. If we're gonna replace things, we want to do it right the first time, buy the appropriate, size air handler, buy the appropriate sized water tank, make sure it's efficient so that we're not in the same boat, 10 years from now replacing it because we bought a cheaper model. And that's not to say that we're buying the Cadillac of, everything. I don't want to mislead anyone that we're just spending money on expensive things. We want to make sure that the money we're spending is done so in an appropriate way. And if that means it extends the life and is more efficient, then that's obviously the choice that we're going to pick.
Tyler, I guess I'm curious, how autonomous are the directors over the facilities that they operate out of? I mean, I guess my question is, at what point do they, come to you for facility improvement needs and stuff versus have that discretion themselves?
So historically, it's been a little bit of a free-for-all, for lack of a better term. Directors have maintained their buildings the best they could with the budget that they had. And unfortunately, a lot of that means just reactionary fixes instead of a comprehensive update. Mm-hmm. As you can imagine, with tight budgets, that's just what happens sometimes. And I don't foresee the autonomy that directors have being removed, but I'll just be, another option for them another resource for them to use to find out what needs to be replaced, what's a higher priority, Part of that, though, will also be, helpful once we get the CIP created and sent out to all the directors, so they can also be thinking of it on their own and not needing, additional support. So Jordan and I will be here to help propose ideas of how we should, prioritize that. But we also have to be cognizant of the fact that we're not in those buildings. So there might be something that is more pressing in one biennium because it's a day-to-day use, stove at the community center versus new gutters. Well, they got to be able to cook those meals and get them out to seniors. So that might take a little priority over the gutters.
Well, I worry I might be seeing in typical Stan form a little bit of a squirrel here and go a little off track. But I remember the two of us having a conversation, I think even before I was mayor, about, directors and their autonomy over their budgets versus a singular buying system. And it wasn't you bringing it up. I think it was me, actually, that was forcing the questioning. But do you see this as a step in that way of kind of consolidating our buying, where we might be able to, be a little bit more strategic in our buying decisions and maybe, better at the actual purchase price? Or do you think it's a bit of a balancing act, where some things we may want to use our collective buying and others we want, autonomy for the directors?
And that's a great question. And I think that having a clear path forward is going to make it much easier to sort of increase our buying power. Like if we identify that 3 buildings need new plumbing, then let's go out for an RFP for plumbing replacement services for those 3 buildings. And so I guess the short answer to that question is I think this will definitely help move in a direction where we're being more thoughtful in how we purchase some of these larger items, by looking at, ways we can save money with multiple projects on one RFP or one quote. And again, that's not to say that it's always going to happen that way. But I think this is a step in the direction to try to be a little more streamlined and, thoughtful with how we're making those purchases.
Well, at the same time, not losing that autonomy that's so important. So yeah, I hear you.
The balancing act.
Yeah, they have autonomy, but at the same time, there still is a process that, we go through with the budget, and typically those are when departments are thinking about their needs. And that's why incorporating this into a CIP is helpful, because then we can prioritize things that we could use for the, from the facilities fund that may be out of the reach for some departments to be able to pay for something that may be substantial at the community center or at the library. But other items such as paint or some small fixes and things like that typically are done, through the budget process. Departments will bring that forward as something they include in their budget, and ultimately it gets approved by the budget committee and the council. But that's also where we gain awareness of what those needs are, and when we can communicate and coordinate with the CIP and the facilities plan too, so that maybe they didn't think to include plumbing, and we have a chance to kind of, like Tyler said, extend our buying power by everybody budgeting at the same time.
Great.
So in the process of determining if a building is no longer feasible to repair or just need to be replaced, we've talked, for example, about the city hall not always being in the best position, best location, best structure. How do we get to the point where we decide that a building is no longer reasonable to repair, or maybe change its use instead of being the center part of our city hall, maybe a use for one of our directors and city hall being someplace else? What's the process for that?
So I think that the first response to that question is we can easily identify how much money we need to spend to update the failing systems at City Hall, like the alarm system or plumbing or HVAC or things like that. The next step in that process is identifying the space issues that we have at City Hall, getting an architect to figure out how we fix those space issues, what's the cost of fixing those space issues, and then making an informed decision on, is it worth spending X to have City Hall in this location, or is it worth looking at moving it somewhere else into a nearly gutted building, for example, if it was the bunker building, and just putting up new walls and a facade, improvement outside. So hard to answer that question, in absolute terms, because we don't know the cost of what it would take to update the space issues that we have at this point in time.
I saw that you have, I think it was 14,000 square feet short of what you think in 10 years you're going to need. That's quite a bit of square foot. And that obviously sometime between now and the end of 10 years, you're going to end up making that kind of a decision. So you're thinking you're leaving that up to sometime down the road, 3, 4, 5 years or something. But and in that particular framework, how do I say it? If we leave it till the last moment, I don't really want to see staff bringing a huge big cost to deal with a situation that we should have been talking about 5, 6, 7 years earlier, so we don't end up having to pay for it all at once similar to our sewer replacement. So we need to figure out a way to anticipate that kind of problem.
Yeah, and I think the first step is going to be looking at, jumping ahead a little bit, looking at those space deficiencies that we have and prioritizing, is space in the library where we want to focus our time, is space at City Hall where we want to focus our time in the short term, try to manage, where the largest need is now, and then figuring out, like I said, the cost for those repairs and replacements to make the space work. Once we have that figured out, then we can look at what's the cost to rehab another city building and make that work for us. So it's definitely, on our radar. I think Jordan and I and anyone else that works in City Hall that's on this call right now can attest to the space issues and our desire for having a little more space or better laid out space. So yeah, it's definitely on our radar and something we're reviewing and trying to figure out the best course forward.
We're all working from home now, and
Well,
in
there
the
you go.
future too. So zero space is the new. Well, one of the ideas too. I mentioned it before, but with the community campus and the bunker building, and actually, I think Tyler's going to talk a little bit more about the space needs. They ran some scenarios, and we do have some of those buildings, and one of the Councilor Exner, your question's a great one because it's an easy answer is when the cost of repairing or remodeling the facility or expanding with expansion, outstrips the cost of just building from scratch new, that's probably the time to make that decision. There's some range of costs in there for doing some City Hall expansion work. It is kind of funny, the nature of work may change, right? In the future, if we're talking about, the ability to do more teleworking, staggered shifts, not just for the next year, but possibly into the future, your space needs calculation does change a little bit. But I think, this report shows that we have an abundance of needs across the board and not just in City Hall. It's obviously a focus because it's one of our oldest facilities and the most confined, but, the community center, even the operations center has expansion plans as part of its multi-phase project. At some point, they're going to need more space to implement those plans. And, Sandy Net is a big question on what we do in the long term with that staff and that operation, especially as they continue to grow and get more customers and need to expand. They need a yard, they need security. The bunker building is not a permanent solution for that staff and that operation. We do have land next to the operations center. The data centers at City Hall, I think I can say that out loud because I think everyone does know that. But that's a very expensive and important asset. So talking about relocating City Hall and that function is a very expensive proposition. But this report, the space needs analysis, it gives us the foundation, it gives us the baseline to say, here's what we have now, here's what our projected needs will be. And now we have to take that information and say, what's the best solution to address all these deficiencies for a future facility or facilities for city operations?
Well, it's a good start because I think it was 3 years ago, we looked at the possibility of purchasing the Forest Service building and as a new City Hall location. And there may be another opportunity come down the road that would be really an advantage to the city and maybe even cheaper. So I know it's important to be able to anticipate those kind of possibilities. You never know what's going to show up.
Absolutely.
You should be prepared for it.
I'm going to jump to the space needs portion of this, unless there's any other facility questions. All right, so space needs. We've already touched on this. We have some space needs here, both square footage wise, and then beyond that, the consultants did an analysis of FTE, full-time equivalents, and gave us some information on where they thought our deficiencies were there. So as far as space needs go, total, we have about 14,000 square feet of a space deficit among all of our buildings. And you'll notice in the chart in the staff report, some buildings, or specifically City Hall, we have 7,600 square feet right now, and our current need is only 7,300. But we feel cramped, and there's issues because of what we're calling circulation space. We have these massive lobbies on both entrances upstairs and a massive lobby downstairs that's really just dead space. It doesn't serve a real purpose most of the time. We do have, long lines for court or on, utility payment due dates where we do get a lot of people and foot traffic in and out of the building. But generally speaking, there's a lot of circulation area that's not being utilized for storage, for staff offices, for meeting space. And those are all the things that we have a deficit in. And so that's part of the reason why, we need to work with an architect moving forward to get some ideas of how we could utilize the space better at City Hall, sort of rework those circulation areas into storage, office space, or meeting space to serve the needs of both internal customers and external customers. Many of you know that come to City Hall, we have just the one conference room upstairs. And when you try to have more than one meeting at City Hall, as I know Stan has been in this scenario before, it's like, where am I going? Am I going into this coat closet? Am I going into the conference room? Or are we having a 2-person meeting in our giant council chambers, with no table? And so part of looking at the space deficit that we have, or the space issues that we have, is really just how can we utilize the space that we currently have in a better way, specifically at City Hall. There's other buildings like the library, for example, that have a nearly 6,000 square foot deficit currently. And they arrive at that number based on not only the staff that are working in the buildings, but also the programs that are offered. And as you all know, the library offers an extensive array of programming, but space is always an issue with where are we going to hold this program? What items are we moving out of the way, for this other program? And if you have young children and have been to some of those programs, it's a real madhouse in there without a nice, clear walking path sometimes because of just the sheer volume of people that participate in those programs. So, over the next 10 years, about 26,000 square feet in deficit. Some of these options, or some of these locations rather, perhaps solve themselves, like community services. If we end up, moving that over to the bunker building as one of the options that's outlined in the report, that space issue resolves itself, at least in the short term. That doesn't answer the question of how are we going to utilize the space at the bunker building, but it does give us a giant sort of blueprint to work from and build it to be what we need it to be, instead of continuing to try to work in the parameters of the building that we currently have. And then building off of the space, the square footage issues itself, just touching on the FTE issues, we have about a deficit of 11 FTE currently. And you'll see that's outlined again by department. And it's pretty close to just every department needs another FTE. And so I'm not going to spend my time advocating for future staff or additional staff in this meeting. But that's something to be mindful of as we continue to, look at the next biennium's budget and the services that we offer as a city, where our shortcomings are with staff and how we can better plan for getting additional staff on board in an area that really needs it. And again, part of that is, getting a clear understanding of how we are offering the services that we are offering. So is there room for increased efficiencies with the current staff that we have? And then just prioritizing where we need more bodies in chairs. And that's obviously a much more involved, process with staff, council, community, sort of everyone that has contact with us.
It looks like Councilor Exner had a question.
Yeah, I noticed that the square footage came from this plan from our engineering firm a few months back, or whatever time it was. Did they think about some of the things we've learned in the last 3 months about how to handle where our staff is located at and how they're learning how to deal with completing their job from home, and that maybe some of that shortages can be made up because of the things we've learned in the last 3 months? Or is this just something that will have to evolve as we go along?
So the report itself was finalized, I think, the week that we closed City Hall. So it does not have, a good look at what we've learned from this pandemic included in it. With that said, I think there is probably room to shave off some of these numbers just because of the working from home capabilities. But we also find ourselves just in the situation where, and I'll use City Hall as an example, Jordan needs an office, HR needs an office, finance needs an office. We still need 2 people at the front counter. And so it doesn't really remove some of the space that we need. We can get creative with how we, stagger work schedules. But a utility clerk's workstation looks a little bit different than the court clerk's workstation. And so, it's just trying to manage how can we merge those environments to be more cohesive and maybe reduce some space, but it doesn't remove the need for that increased in space entirely.
I think actually, it's a really interesting question. I think a lot of people are wrestling with, right, is what are going to be the long-term impacts of what we're going through right now. I tend to land somewhere in the vicinity of there will be changes, there'll be some modifications. We won't snap back to, business as it used to be done. But one of the things actually that, if you think about it and what the recommendations are in the short term and maybe intermediate term, you actually will need more space. Since the recession, the Great Recession, space per square foot per employees have actually been shrinking dramatically. As open floor plans and cube spaces have gotten smaller and smaller. Now with the physical distancing requirements, those spaces are getting bigger and bigger, and you actually need more space in between employees, more open circulation space so you can keep your distance. City Hall is actually relatively confined in terms of the maneuverability. There's not a lot of, secondary exits. There's not a lot of space to allow people to kind of wait in line if they need to pay, a bill or go to court. Staff often have the same pathway to get in and out of their spaces. So those are things that you kind of have to consider too, that it's not a matter of how many people you can squeeze in, but now it's a matter of how many people can you actually get in there safely and give people enough distance, a good airflow using natural air, all these things that we're now learning as good practices. So that's kind of the things I've been thinking about is we're going to be needing to add staff as we're growing. We're already, understaffed and have not enough space, but we also need to create more space for each other. And I think in the future, we'll have a blend of people working from home, but also coming into the office still, because those things are important. The water cooler talks, the collaboration you get from the in-person, relationship building, and, oh, I thought of something. And also meetings, we only have that one conference room. And of course, with technology like this, a lot of meetings will continue to occur online and virtually, but there is value in meeting in person with the, nonverbal communication you get and just a chance to see people in the flesh. So, those are things that we need to, I think, continue to think about that will affect these plans. But City Hall isn't, one of the facilities we do think about a lot with this, but there's other ones too, like the community center has similar problems with shared offices and things like that.
Councilor Lee.
Yes, I think the other thing that's really important with City Hall and with some of the other facilities is you can certainly work remotely to some degree, but you have to deal with the public and provide those services. And it's hard to do that if everyone is working remotely. It's better to have some public options.
Yeah, the other piece, just speaking from my department, we have a lot of paper still in finance with paper checks and invoicing and audit requirements and retention schedules for some of those finance documents. And so we're always going to need a significant amount of space just to store some of those files, unless we have a new FTE that can just scan for me all day long, which also isn't in the budget either. So, there is kind of managing that paper and storage requirements as well, that as much as we want to go paperless, there's still going to be paper that we have around that needs to be stored somewhere. And so that's another issue that was identified as just general storage itself. Let's see. I mean, that was pretty much the quick and dirty of this. I know that some of you had a chance to read the full document, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have at this point in time. The intent was really just to kind of wet your palate and let you know that we have a lot of this information to start building a CIP for the next biennium and future bienniums, and to sort of outline where some of our space issues are and FTE issues are, so that you're all on the same page with you know, what we're working with and what we need to work towards.
Great. Thank you, Tyler. Is there any questions or comments before we close our work session? All right, great. Well, we've all earned an 18-minute break before our city council meeting. So I will go ahead and adjourn our work session, and we'll reconvene for our city council meeting at 7 o'clock. I'll call to order here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That's right, Jeremy. I backed off after you making fun of me gaining weight the last time I stood up.
Did I actually say that out loud, or?
Yeah. Jeff, will you please call the roll?
Councilor Petzold.
Here.
Councilor Smallwood. Okay. Thank you. Councilor Hamblin.
Excused.
Thank you. Councilor Lee.
Here.
Councilor Exner.
Here.
Councilor Schultz.
Here.
Mayor Pulliam.
Here. As usual, I'll go ahead and get us started with the review of our meeting agenda for tonight. We will first call for any changes to the agenda. We will then go to public comment portion of our meeting. I will call out, as I do this agenda review, some other opportunities to provide public comment. So if you're here to speak on a particular portion of our agenda, please listen, and I will explain those opportunities. After that, we'll go to our consent agenda, which is just our city council meeting minutes from our last meeting. And then under new business, we will have we'll open up a meeting for Ordinance 2020-11, approval of the annexation of one property in right-of-way, totaling approximately 6.42 acres. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but you will have an opportunity for public comment during that portion. Additionally, you'll have an opportunity for public comment during 9.2, Ordinance 2020-14, amending section 15.28 of the Sandy Municipal Code related to system development charges. Item 9.3, Resolution 2020-15, adding Gunderson Road and Olson Street to the city's transportation systems plan, will not have public comment during that portion. So if you do want to bring up any thoughts or concerns of that to council, please do use our public comment portion of our meeting for that. And then we will have item 9.4, Ordinance 2020-13, amending Chapter 17.78 of the Sandy Municipal Code related to annexations. We have received some written testimony, which council's reviewed on that. But there will also be an opportunity for public testimony during that portion of our meeting. So basically, out of those 4 items, you'll have an opportunity for public comment other than 9.3. From there, we'll go to reports from our city manager, our committee and council reports, and then we will adjourn for this evening. With that, do we have any changes to tonight's agenda?
No.
Okay. Seeing none, we will go to the public comment portion of the meeting. Please note, as I mentioned earlier, there are separate opportunities for members of the public to comment during our public hearings later in the agenda tonight. The council, though, does welcome your comments on other topics. Please see the instructions on the agenda, but if you are participating online, click the raise hand button and wait to be recognized. If you are participating via telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand and wait to be recognized. Jeff, I will wait for you.
Okay, Mayor, just taking a look. And Mayor, I do not see any raised hands.
Okay, thank you,
Oh,
Jeff.
Well, one just raised just as I said it, Mayor. I apologize.
No problem.
So we do have Kathleen Walker. I'm going to go ahead and click the button to allow you to unmute yourself, Ms. Walker, and please state your name and address for the record. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Kathleen, I see you just unmuted. You should be good.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Oh, hi, thanks. Hey, I just wanted to give a little shout out to the gatherings that we've had the last 2 weeks for the Black Lives Matter, for the protests that we've had, and it's just been a great presence by the city police. I wish I could have seen more of the city council and the school board there. One of the things they are looking at is encouraging the school board to ban things like the Confederate flag on clothing and things like that, which surprised me that was even still something we had to do. I realize you all are not the school board, but I would hope that you all would support something like that to the school board with your voices and your platforms there. So yeah, I think it's been a great thing for the city, and I think there's a lot of support out there. So thank you very much to the police and to the organizers of that event.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Walker. Really appreciate your public testimony this evening. Jeff, we'll go ahead and pause and see if anybody else would like to jump on.
Okay, Mayor, I do have another raised hand. This person signed in under the name Carol Cohen, and you should be able to unmute yourself now, and please state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Welcome, Carol.
Hello, this is Carrie Mallon, 37537 Rachel Drive. Just was curious on the Bailey Meadows development, if it's true that Gunderson Road is going to be the access for all of the construction equipment, and also what's the timeline for that project?
Okay. Thank you so much for your public testimony this evening. We do on our council agenda tonight is a variety of items that deal with that Bailey Meadows development. One is the annexation for the Gunderson Road. The other is adding it to our system development charge structure. Into our transportation plan. I will look to staff during the city manager report, if possible, to give a timeline and stuff on the Bailey Meadows development, as well as maybe any construction access, unless Jordan, you have anything on that access question.
I can answer that really quickly. The construction access, they're seeking the permission from ODOT, and all indication is that they'll be able to do that. And so that was in the development agreement, that they would use the new right-of-way, the Gunderson right-of-way, for all the construction activity. In terms of timeline, it's our understanding that they want to start basically as soon as they close this summer. So it could be as early as this summer, but it's a good question for the developer. I don't know how long in terms it takes for building the infrastructure and the roads and all that first, and then when they come in for building permits. Kelly just appeared, so he might have a better sense of how long these things take. But I know around July was when they were looking to close and start the project. What that means, in terms of construction, actually developing the neighborhood, it could take over the course of a year or so.
I'll just be really quick. We currently are reviewing the construction plans and the erosion grading and erosion control plan. And then we're also filling out and completing the Lux forms, which are basically just legal documents that they have to send to ODOT and different agencies around the state. So we are working with them on a lot of different things. As Jordan already said, the timeline is impossible to know. The developer would be the best one to know that. It's probably going to be anywhere from starting from 1 to 2 months from now, and it could go for a year, it could go for 2 or plus years. These things just have a very big variance on how fast they move along.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for the public testimony this evening.
And Mayor, there are not any more raised hands.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll move on to our consent agenda. Council, any discussion or a motion?
Make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Peetzold and a second from Councilor Lee. Jeff, will you do a roll call vote, please?
Councilor Peetzold.
Yes.
Councilor Lee.
Yes.
Councilor Exner.
Yes.
Councilor Schultz.
Yes.
Mayor Pulliam.
Yes. Motion carries. All right. So we are moving forward to new business. Let's see here. Item 9.1, I will open a public hearing for Ordinance 2020-11. Public testimony for this hearing will be called for in 3 groups: testimony in favor of the proposal, testimony opposed to the proposal, and neutral testimony. If you're participating online, please click the raise hand button at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized. If you're participating via telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized. The speaker time limits for tonight will be 15 minutes for applicant's presentation, 3 minutes for each audience member testifying in favor, against, or neutral, and 5 minutes for the applicant's rebuttal. I am now calling for any abstentions from the hearing body.
Nope.
Okay. Any conflicts of interest from the hearing body? Okay. I am now pulling our hearing body for any ex parte contact, including any site visits.
I have made a site visit a couple times now, and other than general conversations, nothing specific with ex parte.
No, I'm right where Councilor Exner is and everything. Yep, same thing. So, all right. Now I am calling for any challenges to any members of the hearing body. Remember to bring a challenge. If you're participating online, click the raise hand button and wait to be recognized. If you're participating via telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand and wait to be recognized.
Okay, Mayor, I do not see any raised hands.
Okay, thank you. If you testify, you must raise all issues you wish to address at this hearing. If your issue is not raised at this hearing, you may not be able to raise it later in any appeal. Your comment should state why the application should or should not be approved, or include your proposed modifications you believe are necessary for approval according to the standards. If you do not raise specific issues at the final evidentiary hearing or by the close of the record, or fail to provide statements or evidence to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal the decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that particular issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. We're ready for the staff report.
Just give me 1 second here. I'm trying to share my screen. So I'm going to do a screen share for the presentation. So I'm assuming everybody can see that. So the subject before you tonight is an annexation for the area just to the south of Bailey Meadows, which was just approved a couple weeks ago. It's identified here in the gray on tax lot 701 and a portion of Highway 211. Here's kind of a blow up. I think you saw this before when we were talking about the UGB extension process. So it's been a few months, but it just kind of goes through it. Number 1 on here is the parkland. 2 and 6 are both permanent slope easements and construction easements. 3 is the public right-of-way for Gunderson Road. 4 is a public utility easement. 5 is the stormwater tract for the highway, and 7 is the highway portion that would be annexed with this proposal. And again, this is the exact same area that was described and included with the UGB expansion that was just approved by the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners last Thursday by ordinance. So the annexation proposal is 6.42 acres. It's just for a need for public facilities, which is roads, stormwater facilities, and parkland. The applicant is not seeking to add land for residential, commercial, or industrial development. It's just for the roads and the parkland and the stormwater. The annexation would provide, as you all are very aware of, an additional access to Bailey Meadows subdivision and distribute traffic within that subdivision and Nicholas Glen to the north. And it's a logical growth in compliance with criterion C of the annexation criteria. So as you've read probably in the staff report, staff finds that it meets all of the annexation requirements and criteria. Just to recap, the UGB expansion hearing timeline was first heard by Planning Commission in early February. It was then passed by ordinance by City Council in early March. Clackamas County Board or Clackamas County Planning Commission recommended approval in early March as well. And then on June 3rd, Clackamas County Board of Commissioners approved the UGB expansion. Thank you to Commissioner Lee or Councilor Lee for speaking at that hearing. And then, as I said, they just passed the ordinance on June 11th. So it is officially adopted and we've notified the state of Oregon. And the notices to the neighbors that participated in those hearings, I'll just say, is going out in the mail tomorrow. So I don't want to have anybody that's on this call tonight or that talks to anybody tomorrow. They are going to receive notice still. It just hasn't went out in the mail yet. So the comp plan and zone modifications that are included with this proposal, the existing comp plan's ag, the existing zoning is EFU, exclusive farm use. Those are the areas around the state that are designated for farming. If the annexation was to occur, the comprehensive plan designations will be low density residential for the 4.04 acres of roads and stormwater detention facility, and 2.38 acres of parks and open space, which is another zoning designation. If we had some cities have what's called like a public facility zoning designation, and if we had one of those, that's what we would have zoned the road and the stormwater detention pond. But right now in the city of Sandy, we do not have that as a zoning classification. So we would just typically use the lowest residential zone. That being said, the ordinance is very clear before you tonight that it would not be able to be used as residential purpose in the future. It would only be able to be used for the road and the stormwater facility. So the recommendation from Planning Commission and staff is to approve Ordinance 2020-11. I'll just read this. Consistent with the application and the Planning Commission's recommendation, the ordinance contains a condition that limits the future uses of the 4.04 acres, as I just stated, that is zoned as single-family residential, to right-of-way and utility uses and associated facilities to support such uses. And that's the conclusion. So I'll stop sharing at this point. So that's all I have, unless you have questions at this point.
Okay. Seeing no questions, we will go to the applicant's presentation. Welcome. You have 15 minutes. Don't worry, I won't start till you're unmuted and everything.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can. Welcome.
Okay, great. I won't take anywhere near 15 minutes. Good evening, Mayor Pulliam and members of the City Council. Thank you for your time here tonight. My name is Chris Goodell. I'm with AKS Engineering. our firm prepared the application that you're here reviewing here tonight. My address is 12965 Southwest Herman Road, Suite 100, Tualatin, Oregon 97062. I wanted to thank Mr. O'Neill and other city staff for the positive recommendation and their help throughout this long application process. We've reviewed the staff report that Mr. O'Neill prepared, and we agree with the findings and conclusions in it. We appreciate if you would follow your staff's and planning commission's recommendation and approve the application here tonight. As Kelly also noted, this application was reviewed by Clackamas County staff, the Clackamas County Planning Commission, the Board of Commissioners for Clackamas County, who have all either recommended approval or have approved this application. Also wanted to thank Kelly and Councilor Lee for their testimony at the last county hearing. We appreciate it. With that, I'm available for any questions you have regarding the application. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We are now is there any questions before I move on for public testimony? Okay. We will now move on to public testimony. Please try to avoid repetition. If someone else has already expressed the same thoughts, it is sufficient to state that you agree with the statements of a previous speaker, even if that is all you say. If you have documents, maps, or letters that you wish to have considered by the body, they must formally be placed in the record of this proceeding. To do that, either before or after you speak, email your materials to recorder@ci.sandy.or.us, and staff will make sure your evidence is properly processed. As a reminder, testimony for this public hearing will be called for in 3 groups: testimony in favor of the proposal, testimony opposed to the proposal, and neutral testimony. If you're participating online, click the raise hand button at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized. If you're participating via telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized. I am now calling for testimony in favor of the proposal. Please remember to state your name and mailing address for the record. You will have 3 minutes per person. Jeff.
Okay, Mayor, so I'll just take a look and try not to jump the gun this time. The Mayor, I am not seeing any raised hands.
Okay, thank you. I will now call for testimony against the proposal. Remember, we got to state our name and the mailing address for the record. You will have 3 minutes each. Jeff.
Okay, Mayor, we do have Kathleen Walker. So, Ms. Walker, you should be able to unmute yourself now, and please state your name and address for the record in 3 minutes.
Welcome, Ms. Walker.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Kathleen Walker, 15920 Southeast Bluff Road. The point that we raised at the Planning Commission was that the development agreement for this whole parcel of parkland that's being dedicated, there was nothing in the record that said what would happen to the parkland that had to happen under 17.84 for parkland. They were supposed to clear, grade, and seed the parkland. There was supposed to be a sidewalk for access for the parkland, and the houses were supposed to face the park. None of that got addressed in the Bailey Meadows thing that's already gone through. The development agreement has already been finalized, but here we are annexing this property. In the meantime, in order to head off a LUBA appeal, the attorney, Mr. Robinson, reached out to our attorney and confirmed that, and I'll just read it, there will be a sidewalk on Gunderson Road. My client will seed the park site. My client will clear, grade, or fill the park site as directed by the city. My client's preference is to defer this activity because of soil erosion issues. The houses adjacent to the park will face the park. A phase 1 ESA has been completed. However, he says my client is voluntarily providing the park subject to the development agreement. And actually it's being done because he doesn't want to pay the in lieu of fee, which he's getting credit for. So if the UGB expansion is approved, he's not doing it under SDC chapter 17.86 based on the arguments in the subdivision record. While it will do 1 through 4 it is voluntarily doing so and not as an obligation under SDC Chapter 17.86. My client hopes that this information is helpful to your client. I've asked that those commitments be put into the record and that they be held to those commitments. Because that's the points that we kept making before. Your development agreement only covered them giving us the land. It did not cover any of the other requirements that are required under 17.86 for sidewalks, seating, grading, clearing, all that stuff. And that was an oversight on y'all's part because, like I said, that would have been a slam dunk at LUBA. So they've kind of committed to it. So now we need you all to ensure that those are done and that that's part of the record. I don't care what record it's part of, but that those in fact get implemented by them and paid for by them and not by us taxpayers. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Appreciate it.
Taking another look at the list, Mayor. And I do not see any more raised hands.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. I am now calling for neutral testimony. These are general comments, neither for nor against the proposal. Please remember to state your name and mailing address for the record. You will have 3 minutes each. Jeff.
And I do not see any raised hands.
Great, thank you. Staff recap and recommendations.
Yeah, we fully recommend approval of the annexation. I'll speak just a minute or two to Ms. Walker's comments. I saw the email that she's referring to. Mr. Robinson did send an email. I don't know, I don't have it in front of me, but that's what Ms. Walker read sounded exactly like what was said in the email. You cannot, I already ran this by David Doofman, and I'm sure Mr. Crean can chime in here if he would like, but 1786 is not applicable to the annexation, the zone change or the comprehensive plan change. So we can't, I guess you could condition it with this annexation approval, but not statutorily speaking. So I think it would be an easy appeal for the applicant to make. It was not conditioned with the original subdivision approval. The only thing I believe it could be conditioned in at this point is the development agreement. If that's been finalized, then I don't know, but if those items were to be renegotiated in the development agreement, I believe that could be done. But outside of the development agreement, it cannot be done with the original land use decision at this point, and it cannot be done with this annexation process either. So I'll just leave that with you, and I don't know if Mr. Crean wants to add anything to that.
Thank you, Kelly. Mayor, councilors. Kelly's correct. The purpose of conditions is to ensure compliance with an approval criterion. And the approval criterion in this case are just the annexation criterion in your code, not the criteria for subdivision or other development of the site. So unless there's a criterion that requires the conditions of those nature, there's no hook in the code that applies to this application that you can hang them on. The other thing about the development agreement is, to the extent all that's in the development agreement, it has its own enforcement provisions. So you don't need a condition of approval in the annexation to enforce the development agreement. It has its own self-enforcing, if you will, provisions. So in other words, I concur with Kelly's assessment.
Thank you, appreciate it.
And I'll just add, after getting that information from Ms. Walker, I did speak with the developer, and really we're talking about the issue of grading and seeding the property, and because the sidewalks will be built along Gunderson that will be on the side of the parkland, and that, Kelly, I think the homes that are on the park side will be facing the parkland. But you know, my comments on that is, as I emailed Ms. Walker too, is, you know, we have an opportunity with our Parks Master Plan, maybe looking at what the future of that park would be. It's a relatively flat piece of property, and I think we do need to do some analysis on when that park will be ultimately developed. And, you know, is there sort of a timing on when we should, you know, grade it, and think about, stormwater runoff and things like that in the meanwhile, because right now it's, being taken care of naturally, and do we want to disturb that land and now, or do we want to wait until we're ready to actually develop the property? And like I said, with the Parks Master Plan, maybe now's the time to start thinking about a conceptual plan for that future park too. Those are just some thoughts that I had, and mainly I wanted to say that I did have a conversation with the developer, and that what she said was true. They did offer that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any further questions for staff by council? Okay. We are now going to applicant rebuttal. You have 5 minutes.
So, good evening, everybody. My name is Garrett Stevenson. I'm filling in for Mike Robinson tonight. I didn't know if Chris Goodell wanted to add anything, but I think that staff has very well addressed Ms. Walker's comments. Certainly, I think it's in everybody's best interest to keep the decision that we're making here as clean of questionable conditions as we can, but also there's a practical benefit to not throwing these into the decision at the last minute for the reasons that Mr. Wheeler just detailed, which is we want to make sure that the city's involved in preparing an adequate plan for this parkland. And so preserving that flexibility for the future is, I think, probably an important thing. Certainly, if my colleague, Mr. Robinson, committed these things to Ms. Walker and her attorney, we're going to honor those commitments. But without seeing that right in front of me and given staff's comments, I guess I would request that the council not include those as conditions tonight. Sounds like all that stuff is going to happen either through the Parks Master Plan process or through execution of the obligations in the development agreement. So with that, the only thing else that I would add is that we would like it if the council would go ahead and vote and make a decision tonight. If it does, and if that decision is a unanimous approval, we're going to waive final written argument. So hopefully we can get this public lands annexed. Sounds like it's definitely going to be a benefit to the city, and certainly when you have annexations of public property and parkland, it's something that I think we all want to get done as quickly as possible. So with that, I'll offer myself up for any questions that the council might have. Otherwise, I want to thank staff for their good work on this and for those comments in response to Ms. Walker's comments.
Thank you. Any questions by council? Okay.
Just one point of clarification, Stan, just to make the record clean, if you can just state your address. I just want to make sure that gets in there.
Oh, sorry. Garrett Stevenson. My address is 1211 Southwest 5th Avenue, Suite 1900, Portland, Oregon 97204. Although, full disclosure, I haven't been to that address in about 9 months. So best to email me if you need to get in touch.
Thanks, Mr. Stevenson. Appreciate it. So with that, I am now looking for a motion to close tonight's public hearing, unless there's any further questions for Garrett.
I move the public hearing.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Councilor Exner and a second by Councilor Peepsville to close the public hearing. Jeff, will you do a roll call vote?
Councilor Peetzold.
Yes.
Councilor Lee.
Yes.
Councilor Exner.
Yes.
Councilor Schultz.
Yes.
Mayor Pulliam.
Yes. Thank you. Meeting is now closed and we are at council discussion. We've had several conversations on this. I'm comfortable at this point moving forward. Councilor Peetzold.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. This has been several months of going through the process, and this is the last piece of that. So if there's no other discussion, I'll make a motion that we approve the ordinance of annexation of one property and right-of-way totaling approximately 6.42 acres, and assignment of single multi-residential SFR and parks and open space zoning in conformance with the urban growth boundary expansion in file number 20-002 UGB.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to figure out for a little out of order. Jeff, I need you to read the ordinance by title.
Well, I believe Councilor Piesel just did, actually.
Well, I know. So I guess.
So there, I can. You're gonna pay me now?
I mean, I can read it again just to.
You know, I wasn't expecting Councilor Piesel to take his game to another level with this.
Sorry, I got a few words in and then it just kept going.
Well, I guess I've got a motion to adopt ordinance by, he read it by title, a second by Councilor Lee. Jeff, will you do a roll call vote?
Councilor Piesel.
Yes.
Councilor Lee.
Yes.
Councilor Exner.
Yes.
Councilor Schultz.
Yes.
Mayor Pulliam.
Yes, and since we are unanimous, Jeff or Jeremy, if you'd like to go ahead.
I'll give it to Jeff. He's much better at this.
Okay. We'll do this one. This is ordinance 2020-11, an ordinance approving annexation of one property and right-of-way totaling approximately 6.42 acres and assignment of single-family residential and parks and open space zoning in conformance with the urban growth boundary expansion in file number 20-002 UGB.
Make a motion that we approve the second reading of number 2020-11.
I'll second.
There's been a motion by Councilor Piesel to adopt the second, approve the second reading, and a second by Councilor Exner. Jeff, we do a roll call vote.
Councilor Piesel.
Yes.
Councilor Lee.
Yes.
Councilor Exner.
Yes.
Councilor Schultz.
Yes.
Mayor Pulliam.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. So we are moving on under. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate that. We are moving on under new business for our ordinance 2020-14. Public testimony for this hearing will be called for in 3 groups: testimony in favor of the proposal, testimony opposed to the proposal, and neutral testimony. If you're participating online, click the raised hand button at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized. If you're participating via telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized. I am now calling open this public hearing for ordinance 2020-14 at 7:37 p.m. Abstentions from the hearing body.
Nope.
Okay, conflicts of interest. Staff report.
I see Mike's unmuted, so I'll let him give the staff report. But just to do a brief introduction, the council had looked at these 2 items at your last meeting as part of a workshop. These next 2 items, ordinance 2020-14 and then resolution 2020-15, are related to the development agreement and the Bailey Meadows development agreement with Gunderson Road. And a few additional changes in the SDC code, chapter 15-28, that Mike will summarize.
Yeah, as Jordan points out, the primary impetus for these was the development agreement, and that was really limited to one sentence in section 3 of the ordinance, and then all of section 4. But we figured while we had the put up, we'd tweak a few other things in our code that has been kind of problematic, and this way we could do them all in one shot. Section 1 is a new section of the code that allows us to adjust systems development charges by applying a index to update charges based on construction cost changes. And I think when we've done this in the past, a lot of these projects are, several years out, so we don't want to be trying to construct something with $20 in 2027. So we try and apply an index to these charges to adjust them annually. And all three of the four STC methodologies include this in the methodology, but the Parks STC methodology does not. So we decided to just make it apply to all STCs, that they should be adjusted based on the Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index annually. And then section 2, we made some changes to that, whereby the city, the changes to the capital plan can be made by motion of the council or adoption of a budget or adoption of a capital improvement plan. Our local ordinance required that a resolution be used to make changes to the capital plan, and that's kind of cumbersome. And we haven't really been following that. So the state statute just says that the city may adopt changes to its capital plan, and this makes this section of the ordinance more closely follow the state statute. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions for staff at this time? Okay. We are now moving forward to the public testimony portion. Please try to avoid repetition. If someone else has already expressed the same thoughts, it is sufficient to state that you agree with the statement of a previous speaker, even if that is all you say. If you have documents, maps, or letters that you wish to have considered by the body, they must formally be placed in the record of this proceeding. To do that, either before or after you speak, email your materials to recorder@ci.sandy.or.us, and staff will make sure your evidence is properly processed. As a reminder, testimony for this public hearing will be called for in 3 groups: testimony in favor of the proposal, testimony opposed to the proposal, and neutral testimony. If you're participating online, click the raise hand button at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized. If you're participating via telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized. I am now calling for testimony in favor of the proposal. Please remember to state your name and mailing address for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Mayor, just taking a look. And I do not see any raised hands.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. I am now calling on testimony against the proposal. You please do state your name and mailing address for the record. You have 3 minutes each.
I do not see any raised hands, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. I'm now calling on any neutral testimony, general comments, neither for nor against the proposal. We'll again need you to state your name and mailing address for the record, and you have 3 minutes each.
And I do not see any raised hands.
Okay, thank you. Staff recap and recommendation.
If there's any questions of the council, like the mayor pointed out and Jordan pointed out, this is something the council reviewed at a workshop session a couple of meetings ago. So I think the changes are pretty clear or evident to everyone.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. I am now looking for a motion to close our public hearing unless there's further questions for Mike.
Make the motion, we close the public hearing.
Second.
There's a motion by Councilor Peetzel to close the public hearing and a second by Councilor Schultz. Jeff, will you do a roll call vote?
Councilor Peetzel?
Yes.
Councilor Lee?
Yes.
Councilor Exner?
Yes.
Councilor Schultz?
Yes.
Mayor Pulliam?
Yes. Right, we now have the public hearing now closed. Discussion by the hearing body. My comments remain the same as from our last public hearing. I'm feeling good.
Yeah, nothing new.
I'm good with it.
So With that, unless there's an objection, Jeff, would you like to call do the first reading?
Okay, this is Ordinance 2020-14, an ordinance amending Chapter 15.28 of the Sandy Municipal Code related to system development charges.
Thank you, Jeff. A motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve number 2020-14.
Second.
There's a motion by Councilor Peetzel and a second by Councilor Lee. Jeff, roll call vote, please.
Councilor Peetzel?
Yes.
Councilor Lee?
Yes.
Councilor Exner?
Yes.
Councilor Schultz?
Yes.
Mayor Pulliam?
Yes. Seeing that we are a unanimous vote, Jeff, will you please read the ordinance by title a second time?
Once again, this is Ordinance 2020-14, an ordinance amending Chapter 15.28 of the Sandy Municipal Code related to system development charges.
I move that we accept or approve the second reading.
I'll second.
There's a motion by Councilor Exner to approve the second reading and a second by Councilor Schultz. Jeff, will you do a roll call vote?
Councilor Peetzel?
Yes.
Councilor Lee?
Yes.
Councilor Exner?
Yes.
Councilor Schultz?
Yes.
Mayor Pulliam?
Yes. Thank you. All right. Moving on to item 9.3 under new business. Sorry, I've got to toggle back to my agenda here. Resolution 2020-13, amending Chapter 17.78 of our Sandy Municipal Code related to annexations. Remember, you do have written testimony that was received prior at 5 p.m. Jordan, are you the right staff person to go to on this?
I think, are we at resolution?
Yeah.
15?
You skipped one there.
Mayor, we're looking at 2020-15, the adding to the capital improvement plan.
Oh, I just started reading the wrong one. I apologize. Yeah, 2020-15, adding Gunderson Road and Olson Street to the transit plan, capital improvement plan. Sorry.
Yep, sorry about that. Yeah, so this is that second item that we reviewed with the City Council at the work session last meeting. This would be adding Gunderson Road officially to our transportation CIP list. And then also Olson Street we'll be adding to our transportation CIP. This is a project that is also in our TSP, but was not included in the capital plan or the methodology for reasons similar to Gunderson Road. But is now, with the Sandy Woods development approval, it was a condition of approval to have them construct a portion of that road. So this resolution would add those two projects to the transportation CIP. The amounts listed in there, the full amounts of the streets, which includes the full build out, the intersection with Highway 211 in the case of Gunderson, and the portion the developer's doing with the SDC credits.
Thank you, Jordan. As your council discussion, we've had a variety of discussions on Gunderson Road and what we're doing here. Discussion or a motion?
One of the things I guess I'd like to talk about is it's been a while since the council has had a chance to look at our CIP list here, and I'm just thinking that there may be some changes in priorities and maybe some changes in some of the things that we looked at. I am not against Olson or Gunderson. I'm fully in support of those two projects. But for example, I have become recently aware of some of the things on the Kate Schmidt proposal. And one of the things I'd like to talk about is that particular priority and whether or not that's something that's still reasonable. But I think sometime soon, I'd like to propose that we do some discussion about where those things fit on our priority list. It's been a long time, and I don't think the majority of the council here has seen it, discussed it.
Well, I think the majority of us have seen it and discussed it a little bit because it was part of a report that we were looking at when, going through the Gunderson and where it would land on that list. But to your point, Carl, we haven't had a discussion of it to just discuss the list, right? And to get to it. So I hear you. Yeah, no, I agree. We'll look to do that at a future session. It looks like you have a comment, Jordan.
Yeah, it's something we're eager to do too. And honestly, the holdup is, we're embarking on the update of our transportation system plan, where you really get into the nitty gritty of prioritizing these projects, identifying other projects, categorizing, projects as roadway or future pedestrian or sidewalk improvements, et cetera. And, we should be, in the middle of that project, but we're currently still waiting on the state to, finalize their review. And that also goes for the, I'm thinking of it, it goes for the bypass study too. And it's really related to coronavirus and the state being bogged down in a backlog of work. But it is something to look forward to, because I think it's one of the, things you get to do with the transportation system plan, including members of the public and doing public outreach and getting their comments on prioritizing these projects, looking at, data analysis to help prioritize them of what is the higher needs. I hear you, Councilor Exner. We're also looking forward to, updating this list, and that does feed into things like SDC methodology and, those rates and things like that. So.
Any other comments or motion?
I'll make a motion. We approve resolution 2020-15.
And I'll second.
There's a motion by Councilor Peetzold and a second by Councilor Exner. Jeff, will you do roll call vote?
Councilor Peetzold?
Yes.
Councilor Lee?
Yes.
Councilor Exner?
Yes.
Councilor Schultz?
Yes.
Mayor Pulliam?
Yes. Thank you. All right, moving on to item 9.4, Ordinance 2020-13, amending Chapter 17.78 of the Sandy Municipal Code related to annexations. Public testimony for this hearing will be called for in 3 groups: testimony in favor of the proposal, testimony opposed to the proposal, and neutral testimony. If you're participating online, click the raise hand button at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized. If you're participating via telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized. I will now open public hearing for state land use file number 2020-010 DCA at 7:51 p.m. And any abstentions of the hearing body?
None.
Conflicts of interest? Staff report.
All right.
Owen, welcome.
Thanks. I'm going to share my screen and go through a brief PowerPoint. Okay. So we're looking at code changes to the annexation chapter of our development code. That's chapter 1778. The main kind of meat of the change, I think, is to clarify the annexation criteria with relation to public facilities and services, specifically a requirement that requires a property wants to annex to demonstrate how they'll be served by public facilities and services and how impacts to those facilities and services would be mitigated. One thing that came up at the Planning Commission meeting is an interest in exempting smaller properties, like less than 1 acre, island annexations, based on the Oregon State Code, and then properties that have an annexation agreement. So that's written into the code. A few other changes related to that first one is also clarifying the submission requirements regarding compliance with city plans, the transportation planning rule findings, which is a state ODOT requirement, and then FSH mapping, which is already in the code, but just clarifying it a little bit more. And then also clarifying what type of annexation a zone change to parks and open space and or our flood slope hazard overlay zone would be. And then also increasing the noticing distance to 1,000 feet. So it's increasing a bit more so that more people are noticed when an annexation is proposed. So those are the main proposed changes. To go through just kind of a little bit of background as this came up at the Planning Commission meeting. And Kelly's more familiar with this, so he may want to step in at some point. But Essentially these requirements are kind of clarifying more analysis prior to annexation. So it could make the annexation process a little more expensive, but it gives you as council more assurance prior to making a land use decision of this magnitude. So I'm sure you're somewhat aware after Bailey Meadows. So most property owners who are annexing are doing so because they want to develop or they want to sell their property to a developer. So that's kind of the main like impetus of annexation typically. So property owners who are going to annex are typically going to pay for these additional analysis through payments by the developer or reduction in the sale price. But either way, the analysis is factored into the property value. If the property owner doesn't have an interested developer, then the analysis should, in theory, still help them sell the property after annexation, because these analyses need to be done at some point. So a couple of things that happened since the Planning Commission meeting. The Planning Commission recommended that we send notice of the proposed changes to the Annexation Code to all property owners outside city limits, but within the UGB. We hadn't done this initially, it wasn't legally required, and they are outside of city limits, but we did do this in the interim. So all property owners who own property outside city limits but inside the UGB were noticed of these code changes tonight, and we did receive a number of comments, which I believe have been forwarded to you. So hopefully you were able to read all of those. One thing that's come up quite a bit is in our original, the staff original proposal, we had recommended increasing the annexation waiting period for properties that had significant tree removal. So essentially if properties clear cut or removed a lot of trees in the flood and slope hazard, we had recommended increasing the annexation waiting period from 5 to 10 years. The Planning Commission voted to keep it at 5 years, although there was some back and forth and there wasn't, I think, unanimous agreement initially, at least for that, but they did kind of decide on that. But since that meeting, we have received the comments that you've seen that do support increasing the annexation waiting period for significant tree removal to 10 or even more years, as you've seen in some of them. So that was just one thing I wanted to point out. And that is all. I'll stop the share.
Thank you, Emily. Any questions for Emily or Kelly at this time? Okay. Moving on to.
I was going to make a couple comments, but I'll wait until the rebuttal period when staff talks again.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly. All right, we'll move on to public testimony. Please try to avoid repetition. If someone has already expressed the same thoughts, it is sufficient to state that you agree with the statements of a previous speaker, even if that is all you say. If you have documents, maps, or letters that you wish to have considered by the body, they must formally be placed into the record of this proceeding. To do that, either before or after you speak, email your materials to recorder@ci.sandy.or.us, and staff will make sure your evidence is properly processed. As a reminder, testimony for this public hearing will be called for in 3 groups: testimony in favor of the proposal, testimony opposed to the proposal, and neutral testimony. If you're participating online, click the raise hand button at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized. If you're participating via telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized. I'm now calling on testimony in favor of this proposal. Please remember to state your name and mailing address for the record, and you have 3 minutes each. Jeff.
Hey, Mayor, just taking a look. And I do not see any raised hands.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. I'm now calling for testimony against the proposal. Remember, you must state your name and mailing address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes each.
Hey, Mayor, the first hand up is Kathleen Walker. You should be able to unmute yourself now, and please state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, welcome back, Kathleen. I believe you need to be unmuted.
I'll see if I can do it manually, Mayor.
Okay.
Ms. Walker, there should be a button that's popping up that says you're being asked to unmute. I actually can't forcibly do it. Sorry, Mayor, I'm not sure why that's not working this time.
All right,
Oh,
I got
there
it.
we go.
Sorry about that.
Kathleen, no problem, Kathleen. We can hear you now.
Okay, thank you.
3 minutes.
I did send my testimony in letter form. Kathleen Walker, 15920 Southeast Bluff Road. It's not that I'm against this proposal. I just have some recommended changes that a lot of the other people also agreed with. And basically it's that we just want to make sure that any agreement or anything or any annexation proposal that they agree to pay for not only the local roads, but arterials and collectors. It is kind of surprising to me that Olson Road there, that we're going to pay for that, the collector aspect of that with SDCs, when really all that development should have been building Olson out as a collector. Those are the kind of things that we really need to kind of get a handle on so that developers are paying those costs and not the taxpayers. Please ensure the developments build all roads needed to not exceed average daily traffic according to the accepted design engineering standards. Please ensure that developments wanting to be annexed agree to dedicate land as outlined in the existing and proposed parks and trails master plans. Please ensure that that development wanting to be annexed agree to pay for and construct any other projects outlined in all other master plans that we have, including the sewer and waters. Another important aspect are that they not propose zone changes after the fact. It's important for you all to know that if they're wanting to annex in but then change everything up, all the agreements you've made up front with the analysis are kind of out the door. And then you've got, it's kind of you kind of bait and switch. So they should be required to disclose proposed zone changes so there's no surprises. Please ensure that you change the annexation period from 5 to 10 years. Even the state forestry, Oregon State Forest Act requires 6 years before to consider trees, to consider reforested clear-cut areas, 6 years planted and free to grow. So 10 years, you're still gonna not even have Christmas tree-sized trees. So 10-year is not that big of a deal. Please ensure that your proposed annexations are posted on your city website with maps and explanations. People within 1,000 feet are hardly anybody. So we all care and we all want to know about it. So please make sure we get the word out. I think overall that our code, annexation code, should kind of discriminate. We can be somewhat discriminating as to who we annex in. And we want to make sure that we're not having things like the Bailey Meadows, the Orient gas station, and things like that. So thank you. What did you say? Is that my time?
I just have 30 seconds, Kathleen.
Okay. I do have another addendum on there that just responds to the Fair Housing and the Tracy Brown. And basically, the UGB expansion is how we would expand additional land if we needed to. And yep, thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you all consider it.
Thank you, Kathleen. I appreciate your time this evening. Jeff, I'm looking for more testimony against the proposal.
Mayor, there are not any other raised hands.
Okay, thank you. I'm now calling for neutral testimony. These are general comments, neither for nor against the proposal. A reminder to state your name and mailing address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes each.
Well, Mayor, we have a hand that keeps going up and down.
I saw it too.
I'll just give it one more second here.
Wait. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna assume that's an accident. So I don't believe there are any raised hands, Mayor. Oh, yeah.
It's a glitch.
I think so.
Or someone's really having a good time at our expense, Jeff. Oh, okay.
The person that keeps raising their hands and lowering it, again, to keep the record clean, I would just let that person speak, and then if they decline it, then we'll just call that a decline.
Okay.
That's what I would recommend.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, so this is the attendee signed in under the name Stephen Winkler. So you should see a button to unmute yourself if that indeed was your intention. And
Yes,
please.
yes.
Oh, hello, Mr. Winkler. Thank you. I remember to state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes, sir.
Okay, I'm sorry if I kept on trying to put the raise hand and he kept on going off. So I'm a little vague. It seems to me that this resolution is very loosey-goosey on what developers can and do. And there doesn't seem to be any very stringent stipulation that they have to do anything that conforms with the public interest. It seems almost as if they're carte blanche to do pretty much whatever they want. This concerns me. I'm kind of new at this, and I'm not familiar with all the nuances involved. But is there some mechanism to assure that whatever they do does conform to public approval, or is it kind of like a laissez-faire type thing where they have carte blanche to do what they want? I guess I'm looking for clarification. That's all.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Winkler. I'll look for staff in their staff recap to attempt to address some of those questions.
I didn't give my address. Should I give my address?
Yeah, that would help, please.
I'm at 17170 Southeast Piers, number 3, Sandy 97055.
Thank you, and thank you very much for your testimony this evening, sir.
And if I'm really off base, sir, I'm sorry.
No, you're great.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Emily
Yes.
might have a few things. Emily, do you have anything you want to? Oh, sorry.
Well, I don't see any other raised hands, Mayor.
Yeah. See no further raised hands. We'll go to the staff recap. Yeah, Kelly?
Sorry about that. I was jumping the gun there.
You're good.
Emily, did you have anything you wanted to add before?
I'm just going to reiterate, yeah, I mean, most of these changes, again, they're pretty much, I drafted them, but they're really written by Chris, who's conveniently on the phone tonight, or the video tonight, so he may want to chime in as well. But I mean, really, this gives you as city council, I think, more power in terms of requiring that a developer, that a property owner who wants to annex conform to our city plans. So one thing under, let's see what section, 177850 A2, which is our part of the annexation criteria that we've drafted. The very last sentence says, in order to ensure adequate public facilities and services will exist to serve property annexed to the city, an applicant may be required to enter into an agreement with the city that governs the extent and timing of infrastructure improvements. So my understanding and the intent, you know, when I originally was drafting this, was that this gives you as the council the ability to enter into sort of an annexation agreement, but a development agreement, if you will, where you can kind of stipulate a little bit more depth what they may be required to do. Doesn't force you to do this, but it gives you that power. So hopefully that addresses some of the comments. And then Kelly, and then maybe if Chris also wants to chime in.
Yeah, at the end of mine, I was going to ask for Chris to chime in, especially since he's had experience in other municipalities writing similar code language processes. So, you know, we certainly cannot, I just want to be very clear, discriminate against certain property owners. If the property owner shows that they meet all the annexation criteria and can also meet the different facilities plans, you would still have the option to deny the annexation. But I just want to be very clear in the public listening. And that is discrimination or going against one individual.
Kelly, I apologize to interrupt. I think everyone else is getting it too. You're getting you're really gurgly as you speak to us.
Oh, is that better?
That is better, yes.
Yeah.
And right when you asked that, you went bad again.
I think it's your cable for your mic and headphones.
Yep.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay. So what I was saying is I just want to be very clear that these code changes are not set up to discriminate against any particular individual or developer. You would still have to meet the annexation code criterion, and then in addition to that, you would have to define or show through some analysis that you can meet our other master plans. I don't think, as Mr. Brown stated in his comments both to the Planning Commission and City Council, we're not looking for such robust analysis that it's going to break the bank for a mom and pop or something like that that's looking to annex. But what we are looking for is some additional assurances so we don't have another Bailey Meadows situation. So we don't have another situation such as the Bluff development that happened and then we got into a legal battle with the ownership group at the time on whether they would pay for Jewelberry Road being extended or not. So these are both very big examples, but they are worthwhile examples of what we want to avoid. And the annexation criteria and making the annexation process a little bit more robust and additional analysis required, that will reduce the chances of these big different developments coming in and kind of sinking the ship or basically overwhelming our development code. In addition to that, we will be coming back before you in the next month or two here with some additional changes to Chapter 17-100. That will address, once the property is actually annexed into the city, then what additional requirements within the development criterion for a subdivision would be required. So that's forthcoming still. And I did want to remind everybody that, you know, an annexation process, I think David Doofman said this at Planning Commission, and I'll just steal it from him, it sounded really good, is that the annexation process is as political as it is land use. And so in saying that, historically speaking, in the state of Oregon, they allowed different cities and municipalities to have voter-approved annexations. And so there you go, it's as much political as anything else. Then 3 or 4 years ago, Chris Pryor remembers the Senate bill, but a Senate bill basically said that cities in the state of Oregon cannot require that anymore. So we had to take that out of our code, and now it's just a city council vote. But because it's a city council vote, it's still a political vote in some sense, and having more discretion as a council to make that decision is ultimately still putting it in your hands and making it somewhat political, which has always been the intent from my understanding of annexations within the state of Oregon. And with that, I just want to turn it over to Chris in case he has any other words of wisdom or any good quotes like David did before Planning Commission. So,
oh, great. These better be good, I guess.
Well, I'm not as eloquent as David, so I apologize, but I'll at least try to be coherent. I thank you, Kelly and Emily, for that background and the staff report. On the code amendments, I mean, both Ms. Walker and Mr. Winkler, Ms. Walker in particular, addressed effectively infrastructure concerns, the roads, and what about the parks, and I assume there are also sewer concerns and water concerns, and a concern that development effectively essentially pays for itself and that those things can be provided to a property as it develops, and you want to know that going in, right? So the way we have structured these code amendments is it requires a person applying to annex to show how they can provide those services and facilities to the property. And then it takes a step further and says you also have to show how you're going to mitigate impacts to existing city facilities. So if you're going to put a bunch of new traffic on an existing road, show how that can be mitigated. If it's going to require upsizing existing water lines, show how that can happen. If it's going to require a dedication of public revenue, that has to be done before the annexation. You can't annex vetting on the come. So, but I agree with Kelly that the analysis required is not so robust that it's going to dissuade someone from annexing. But at the end of the day, because as Kelly again reiterated, these decisions are political as much as land use. The final criterion that has to be met in order for you to approve an annexation is a determination by the city council that it's in the public interest to approve the application. This is not a quasi-judicial residential application. These do not have to be clear and objective standards. This is a subjective decision that the city council gets to make whether or not you think annexing a particular piece of property is in the city's best interest. And if you don't think it is, you don't have to approve it. So that is the ultimate discretionary control over this process. There's a lot of technical work that has to go into an annexation so that you can make sure your technical concerns are addressed. But at the end of the day, if you don't think the development's going to develop or produce the way you thought it would, or line up the way that it's being promised, you don't have to approve it. So we wanted to make sure that that ultimate bit of discretion resides in the council, and that you have the ability to exercise that discretion on a case-by-case basis.
Outstanding. Thank you.
I did want to add one more thing, actually. Sorry. I just wanted to clarify that there's only one in the hopper right now, but any annexations which have actually been submitted to our office, there's one for a property off Highway 211. They're not proposing any big development with it at this time. That's not to say in the future that they couldn't, but that property would not be subject to these new laws if they were voted in by council. I just wanted to make that clear, that they fall under the existing annexation code criteria, even if you were to adopt the code as we're proposing. So I just want to make that very clear for everybody.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate that. Any additional questions from council for staff? Councilor Schultz.
Yeah, I was wondering, Kelly, if you can walk me through the 10-year tree situation. It sounds good to me. Why would Planning Commission not be on board with extending that to 10 instead of 5 years after a clear cut?
Emily, do you want to address that more? I think you had a pretty good grasp on kind of the different perspectives. Sure. Yeah.
I certainly can't answer why Planning Commission didn't support it. There were some members who did. The main thing, and Kathleen Walker wrote this in her letter as well, if you clear cut, it's going to take way more than even 10 years for a tree to grow back to any significant size. In our code, we don't even consider it a tree until it's 6 inches diameter at breast height. My thought is that probably even at maybe 15 years might be better for that. So if you clear cut in the state right now, you do have to reforest, you do have to replant. 10 years just seems a little bit more of a penalty, I guess, than 5. I mean, it's somewhat of a moot point, because in theory, if they want to annex into the city and develop, they shouldn't really be clear cutting before that. And once they annex with our current code, they really can pretty much remove all the trees anyway, except for 3 per acre. So it's a little bit of a moot point, but just if they do happen to clear cut, the 10 years gives a little bit more time to regrow those trees and a little bit more of a waiting period. It's kind of the gist.
Okay. Councilor Exner?
I don't know if I want to go into that detail at this point here, but just some rationale. Forester for 30 years, and probably 15 of that very involved in reforestation, east side, west side, environmental types. Mostly we had just certified in 5 years that there was an established stand of trees, and we really didn't certify until 10 years that those trees were valid, reasonable, and trees that would probably make it through to maturity. 5 years is a pretty tight time. I'm thinking that 5 years is a bit limited, and it probably wouldn't be a penalty even if you decided you want to put something in there for 10 years. By then, you're really starting to see some of the dominance of the tree, whether it's established, and makes it through some of the different early year survival issues that come up. Because you might get, as a younger tree, they're small enough that they can be damaged by animals, by people. Lots of things can happen between year 5 and year 10. So I'm actually was going to propose that we use 10 years instead of 5 years, but that's my rationale. My experience since in reforestation for the last, or for my 15 years.
Thank you, Councilor. Appreciate that. Further questions for staff from council? Okay, with that, we can also have a motion to close, and then we'll go into discussion.
I'll make the motion that we close the public hearing.
I'll second.
Motion by Councilor Peetzel, the second by Councilor Exner to close the public hearing. Jeff, we do a roll call vote.
Councilor Peetzel?
Yes.
Councilor Lee?
Yes.
Councilor Exner?
Yes.
Councilor Schultz?
Yes.
Mayor Pulliam?
Yes. Thank you. All right, we are now open for discussion.
I'll go ahead and start off. You know, the tree part, the 10 years, I'd be okay for, but the rest of it, I feel uncomfortable with. You know, I think, you know, being on planning commission for a couple of years and being on the city council, 14 years having annexations come by, they don't come by that often in my 16 years that we've had that there. But to have a mom and pop that might own 10 acres of land near the city, a grandma and grandpa, to have to go through something, involve this extra red tape that I believe is in the actual part of being the development process, not the annexation process, would be duplicating it if we made them do it twice. The thing is, I've seen property annex in and still haven't been developed in 15, 20 years, big pieces of land. And so over that time, things have changed. We just went through a whole urban growth boundary study. We spent a lot of money on that. We decided in that where roads were supposed to go, where everything was supposed to go. We looked at it with Kelly, with Tracy, on that of where land would be annexed in for things like, you know, elevation drop for sewers, as that would be the least expensive areas to go into. We did all those studies and said, this is the land that when it becomes ready to annex in, they would follow the criteria of that annexation piece of it. Didn't mean that they had to tell you what it was all going to be used for. Like, we know it's already going to be zoned in that particular fashion because that is already been placed on all of that land. So to go over that, I think will be very complicated for these people, adding a lot of red tape into something that was designed as the development piece of that. The, you know, I appreciate Tracy Brown's proposal, that what he laid out, you know, and one of the things that he said that annexation is more a request for jurisdiction authority change, not necessarily a development or what the development will look like. It's to be able to pay taxes, vote, and that type of thing in it, which I do agree that that is. I think there's the process. Then if you do it once, you have to do it again, and it's added burden on that property owner. Also, if what was I going to say? The we don't know in the you know what that land will look like going forward, nor does that developer, especially if they're gonna you know not sell it for 10 years from now. So anyways, I just think it's an extra burden. My experience on council and has been that this has not been it's been done at the planning commission first with, or the opening up in the development stage of it. Also, it still has to come back through city council, still be approved of that criteria. I think to plug some of these holes that we've come up across with Bailey Meadows, I do believe that developments should pay for themselves. And I think that when getting caught in what would be some change in case law that was recent, we need to adapt and change our development code. If we have not do that, you know, that is the process. Because even then we'll get stuck in the same situation if we haven't done that already. So I would say put our time towards fixing those holes and not creating more red tape for the grandmas and grandpas and the people next door that are going to be annexing in. Because the development is going to have to go through the development process again, and now you're just doing it twice. That's my statement.
My turn to screw it up. I said I appreciate that, Counselor, and I see a couple hands raised. I saw Counselor Exner go up, and then Counselor Lee.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Counselor Pietzel from all the things that he's talked about there. I don't want to repeat a bunch of stuff, but one of my perception is, and I have also been on Planning Commission for several years, as well as council, and watched several of these annexations that occurred come through the business of being approved. both as a vote and as a council. And my understanding of that is that this is much political and can be influenced that way. In fact, when it was a vote, I mean, I think it was almost entirely a political situation. Very few people understood the ramifications of putting in a piece of property or not. And our current responsibility now, I think, makes it very important to look at the political side as well as the physical side. But I guess my point I want to make sure of is that I want to state is that there's a lot of changes that could happen between the time that it becomes annexed in and the time that it actually gets planned. And I'm really concerned that the way Bailey Meadows happened is, I think that to have done it at the annexation time, there have been so many opportunities for changes, so many opportunities for time to pass by, and even laws, as well as opinions, as well as changes in who lives next door. All those things could happen. I'm aware of at least one property that I listed and was not able to sell that has been annexed now over in the Bornstedt area, probably in the order of 4 or 5 years now, and has still yet to become sold. There's some issues about the property, but things have changed a lot in the 4 or 5 years. And I know that those transportation issues that we really are concerned about need to be handled, I think, at the time that the professional folks are really in terms of building a development. And I would prefer to see some of these insurances down at the subdivision level rather than at the annexation level. And surely we can take a look at them. But again, Jeremy spoke well about it being done under the urban growth boundary process. And so I would prefer to see some of these things really just focused in on the end of the process instead of at the beginning of the process. So a couple of things. I think Ms. Walker talked about doing some of these master plans as they are in their condition, as they move along. And so developers should be falling in with the drafts and such. I have a concern about the drafts. I think that until we get a finalized master plan of any kind, whether it's parks or whether it's art or whether it's particular roads, all the development kinds of master plans we built over, I would like to see those be effective when they are passed rather than partially done, not thought out, still need to go through a fair amount of analysis. So I think that would be something to be able to watch out for, and I wouldn't be in favor of. And then I talked about the tree thing. I think that 10 years ought to be more of the time frame for finding out if that tree is going to survive. So, and I'm going to leave it there.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Lee.
Yes, having served on the County Planning Commission, I think there is value in having more sideboards in the UGB process. And what I wanted to ask of Chris was how he has seen this handled in other cities, and if what we're proposing is a lot more than what other jurisdictions are looking at.
Councilor Lee, am I not, there we go. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Councilor Lee. No, every city is different in the particularities of what it requires at the annexation stage. And in general, I would say that the proposal in front of you falls somewhere in the middle of, but they all have different concerns. And the one, frankly, this is the first time I've seen a proposal that would prohibit an annexation based on prior logging. Right? That I haven't seen that anywhere. Mm-hmm. But the focus on infrastructure and being able to provide the infrastructure and meet the public facility needs of a development in the city it's annexing is consistent with what other cities are doing. And I specifically added the public interest standard at the end because I've seen more cities moving towards that, particularly since the legislation in, I think it was 2017, prohibiting voter-approved annexations to give the city councils the ability to act in the voter's stead in that regard. I'm seeing more cities put in a public interest requirement in order to approve annexation, but the public facilities aspects are pretty consistent with what I see in other jurisdictions.
I really like the public facilities as well as, slipped my tongue, the other point you mentioned. Public interest is important. And since we lost that with the voters' ability, then I think that we need to commandeer that process ourselves.
I will say there are many reasons why you might deny an annexation having nothing to do with public facilities. If you know it's going to be residential, you might have concerns about school capacity, for example, or the ability of your police and fire departments to serve the area for topographical or just, I don't know, maybe there aren't water mains out there and so you can't get fire hydrants there yet. So there might be reasons aside from public facilities that would cause concern and lead you to disprove an annexation. The other thing I wanted to mention just very briefly is you did receive a letter today from the housing land advocates that assumes that what you're considering is a comp plan or zone map amendment, and that's not what's pending in front of you. You're talking about a text amendment to your zoning code, or to your annexation code. But the other thing they say is they assume is that every annexation is for residential, and they're not. You might conceivably approve an annexation for industrial or commercial property. So, and there might be reasons to deny on a public interest basis, there might be reasons to deny that annexation having nothing to do with public facilities. So because the potential universe of types of annexations is unknowable, it's good to have that standard in there so that you can approve or deny based on your sound judgment and discretion.
I wanted to add something else too, because I think there's a point that might be not clear to everybody that's reviewing the code criteria. So if you look at the actual code criteria before you on page 4, there's 4 different things you have to do with this proposal. The first one's demonstrating how it serves public facilities and services, kind of the main point that we've been talking about. The second one is how it impacts those same sorts of things. The third one is the transportation planning rule that we're adding in here, but that's a state requirement. So we cannot not add that into this. Even if we didn't add it into the annexation code, we still have to require it. That's number 3 on page 5 of the proposed code changes. Number 4 is the best interests of the city. So that's the real discretionary one where city council can vote either way. But I wanted to make it very clear that if you move down to B within 177860, not only are properties under 1 acre exempt from the more robust analysis that we're proposing here, and not only are island annexations also exempt from that, but also any other annexation which executes an annexation agreement with the city of Sandy. So if you want to take, for example, the 10-acre mom and pop parcel, and they say, well, we just want to annex in because we want to pay more taxes, we want police service, we want to be able to vote in the city of Sandy. We don't have any desire to develop this property now or in the foreseeable future. All they would have to do is sign an annexation agreement with the city of Sandy saying that when that is not the case any longer, then 1 and 2 within 177850 would have to be adhered to before we allowed additional development. So this development agreement procedure basically allows some of these properties to come in without the more robust analysis and delay that analysis until such a time that they want to develop. However, what this does allow with the code changes is the properties that do want to come in right now and develop, we're going to run them through the more rigorous process right up at the gates so that we know if they're going to have impacts to our facilities or not. So I just want to make that very clear. I don't know if that was being caught in the conversation, but there is a way around doing the more robust analysis. If you sign the annexation agreement and say, I will delay this to a future time, but I will agree to do that at a future time before I have additional development rights.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm going to call on Councilor Exner. I'm afraid if I don't, he might leap through a screen. Go for it, Councilor.
Trying not to be too wound up here, but I do see some issues there, Kelly. And going to the 177860 number G, there were some criteria in there that I thought went far and beyond what is probably going to be reasonable. I think even in a little larger development, the one in there I think was required, instead of being approximate located within the land development annexation proposal, you wanted it surveyed now. And I know that there are many times when things change, that survey is a fairly substantial expense. And seems to me that being able to have that approximated where the location of the park might be, where the other facilities might end up being, would be relatively reasonable to be put in there as an estimation. And then when it became a subdivision, that's when the survey would be required, and specifically within inches know where those things are. So that's an example of the kind of things I think I'm seeing that looks like it's going to be required on the early on process of the annexation. And then we end up with a relatively duplicative process at the subdivision level. And then again, my example of a piece of property that I tried to sell after being annexed into the city in the Bornstedt area, couldn't do it for all the other reasons. It's been 4 or 5 years, and I'm sure that anything that they had thought of at the beginning would be changed, could be adjusted, because they want to find a way to make it so that it would be sellable to a developer, where previously the things that they had put in there wouldn't seem to be reasonable, wouldn't be economical. So to me, I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so concerned about the Bailey Meadows situation, is if that were to have been analyzed when it first was annexed into the city, changes like what to do with the road locations would be something we'd surely want to have that specified, thought out, analyzed prior to any kind of movement from the proposal to any kind of approval, either through your staff or through the Planning Commission. So my thinking is it's really appropriate to put it into the tail end where the subdivision area is.
So just to clarify, Carl, that surveyed location is for the flood and slope hazard overlay. So that would only be required on properties with creeks running through them.
I thought they were also for wetlands and for...
Yeah. But so we don't require them at this time. What ends up happening, and this has been happening since I worked at the city of Sandy, is we annex the property, and then the next step is to find out where those areas are located. Once they have those surveyed, they then have to come back through city council again, now with a comp plan and zone change amendment. So they're spending another $5,000 or $6,000 later on that they wouldn't have to spend with this method. So we're actually trying to save them money. What's that?
If they had a survey on both times, sure, they'd have to relook at that process if they found them changed. But if they were estimating, that's a fairly simple aerial photo kind of a solution, and you don't have to deal with the precise acreages or the precise lines when you're doing proposals, which when you get to the point where you actually have a development plan that you need to do the surveys, come up with the exact places. I guess I'm looking at the amount of work that
I think you're annexer. I don't know if you understand. So when they're surveying for the fish boundary, that is a line that has to be defined and then rezoned on our zoning maps and our comp plan maps.
Right. Yep. And it should be exactly accurate as possible.
So I'm saying if you don't do it at the annexation phase, it's going to cost the property owner more, because then they have to reapply for an additional zone change and comp plan change at a future date to have those maps changed. They're basically applying twice instead of just once. So you're costing them more money in the end by making them go through the land use process again and rehire everybody again to come out and do it. I guess I guess I don't understand what the cost savings would be.
I guess I'm not getting my point across either. When you're doing something, when I used to do plans, and I'm sure it's not city stuff, but when I would do plans with a previous government organization I worked for, you start getting from a very broad basis, and you get some idea what the problems are, and you don't have to survey them exact. You look at, analyze, find out that there's some issues, and so you get a little more detailed and more detailed. And by the time you get to the point where you're actually flagging them out on the ground, surveying them on the ground, that's when things become really important. And that's when, to me, what happened with Bailey Meadows is that we really didn't notice this thing until the very end, where we knew we didn't want to have one exit. And we should have been saying to ourselves, there's no way we're going to allow this process to happen where we're only going to have one exit. We need to have two exits. That happened over on the bluff with Jewelberry. And I think we brought that up a couple times now, how we got there with only one exit for 200-300 houses. We shouldn't have done that.
Well, that was part of the development part.
Yeah, Councilor Pete, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I will still agree on what I said earlier, and I understand what Carl's saying, and maybe that's because we have been on the Planning Commission there and seen this process through. I still don't, I see this as a larger, definitely burden on the one individual, that the process should be in the development part of it, and it's going back to the development part once it's done once before. And I guess maybe it's not straightforward because, I mean, I'm not getting it, and I think I understand this a little bit more than the person that has no experience in being on a planning commission or being on a council before, and I see that it is still burdensome on those individuals that then have to turn around and do it again. I understand what you're saying, that you'd have to rezone that for the fish overlay, but that might not be what is developed for. And so it's not clearly stated out either that if you sign an agreement, you know, we'll let you not do that until you come back. I guess that's what would be the exact same thing as going, let the development, whoever's developing, put out the development plan for that. What I heard you saying earlier, Kelly, is that you can sign that agreement, you're not going to develop it, but when you do need to develop it, you have to, you know, go through that process. Well, that would be the exact same process of development plan, but using more of staff's time and more of that. I think we have had a very clear standards, and to what Kathleen had said before, you know, being discriminatory. We don't want to be discriminatory against any individual that's coming up or future councils doing that. We had a very set standard. Is it continuous with the city boundaries, inside the UGB, these type of things? You know, does it not create an island? Is it not a cherry stem? Very clear there, and let the development part be part of the development stage. As Carl said, you know, about a piece of property, I mean, we can just look right down the street to this north and south, and when it came into the city limits, shoot, Sabella Farms came in, and, you know, were they needing all that stuff in there that it probably wouldn't have done anything to have that study done in that fashion. So, you know, it's not just residential, it is commercial, it is industrial, as Chris had mentioned before. It's all of it. Look at Lundine's property and those Skippers, those haven't been developed in 20 years. And so by having them go through all that stuff there to then not, you know, I guess that's just, I don't think it's at the appropriate place in the development part of it.
And Councillor Peetzold, you feel strongly that the, you know, the agreement with what Kelly pointed to of coming through the city process is not a good enough remedy for some of those concerns?
I think that's the same process as, you know, getting it annexed in, and then you have to have the developer create the you know, the same thing. I mean, you're saying going through that process. Well, that's what you just did. But you're doing it once at that point in time. You're not, you wouldn't, I would hope, wouldn't say, hey, submit another plan before we go and, you know, submit this analysis and then go and submit your development plan after that, after being in the city limits. So I would say so. I'd say that would be just doing it double there. And why would we want to do that? If it's already in the city limits, at that point with that, you would just have the development plan for that.
I think you might want to have your attorney speak to that, because through the development agreement, it doesn't fall under the same discretionary obligations for needed housing and other things that Bailey Meadows got us with. So if you do it through the development code, needed housing, clear and objective standards, all that comes into play through the development agreement. That stuff, in my understanding, Chris, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that stuff's not in play. You're showing if you're going to meet the code or not. So if you just basically delay everything to later and then do it through the development process, I don't think you're going to have the same results as doing it through a development agreement.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going to go with the question is are we going to find ourselves right back to where we are?
Will you find yourselves back where you are if you defer compliance with all these standards until the development phase?
Yes.
Question. Yes and no. Kelly's suggestion is a development agreement allows you to accomplish things that you wouldn't be able to do if all you got to do was apply your code standards. And I think that's correct. I think somebody mentioned there's a property that's been sitting in this city. If that property came forward to develop for residential, all you could do is apply your code. And because it's residential, you're stuck with clear and objective standards. Your discretion is very, very limited. If you had entered into an agreement prior to annexation that specified how that property was to develop, those constraints would apply even within the subsequent development review process. It still would have to go through development review, but how the contours of that, what it would look like, would already have been worked out between the city and the developer if there's a development agreement. And the way that the annexation amendments are structured, that if somebody's willing to do a development agreement with the city, then they don't have to do all that other infrastructure type analysis as a condition to annexation. So you could put all that stuff in your development agreement instead, and anything else you want in the development agreement, and bring it in without requiring all the upfront analysis, and you'd still then be able to apply your development code. I think the reason for putting all of this in the annexation process is to give some assurance that the property can develop in a way that is consistent with your infrastructure needs, and not finding out later that the roads aren't there or that they're not big enough, but the developer isn't contributing enough to require the developer to upsize them, so it falls back on the city, right? It's an attempt to flush out surprises before the property is annexed, and not to find yourself stuck with a development process. And Kelly, I want to ask you a quick question. Counselor, your discussion with Counselor Exner, you suggested what this does is avoid the developer from having to go through the process twice. And is that because a zone is applied at annexation, and then when they come in to develop, they have to go back and do the wetlands delineation and go through the zone process again? So requiring that survey at the time of annexation saves them from having to go through the zone change process twice.
Correct.
Is that what you? Okay.
Yes, exactly.
On a fish overlay, right?
Yeah, fish overlay.
There's a number of things that are there. I guess my question for you, Chris, would be, how do we know that we don't get into a Bailey Meadows situation again, either at annexing time or at subdivision time? And it seems to me that the more we know about a particular proposal from a developer, the more we should be able to say specifically, we want this second road, we don't want it to go through the particular wetland, we want to have a park in this location. But the more we know about those kinds of facilities, the more we can be specific about telling that developer at the time when he needs to know where those roads are going to go, where those houses are going to be, all the rest of the list. How would we do that at the earlier stages when we don't know as much about, or we may have time pass that laws change, people change, technology changes, all those things. And it could be, I know typically it's not years and years, but we do have examples of years and years from annexation to build out. How do we do that?
A couple of things. I love this question because what it highlights is something that I think people forget, and I heard it in, I know, Mr. Winkler's comments. Annexation is just the first stage of a process. It's not the development stage. A lot of the things you just talked about, you won't know it. Where the houses go, you won't know at annexation. You won't know that. That's the next step, the development review process. But what you can do at annexation is some fundamental kind of basic analysis to provide yourself a high degree of confidence. I won't say certainty, but a high degree of confidence that the public facilities, sewer, water, roads, parks, those things are there to serve the property when it ultimately develops. I don't know the details of the Bailey Meadows. I've heard things in the office and some of the discussion. My sense is that if this analysis had been done for that property at the time it was annexed, you would have discovered that there wasn't a second road into the property. So then you could have denied the application. So it's not going to give you complete certainty, but it gives you enough to know, to have a better sense of whether the property can in fact be served by public facilities and services when it gets to the development review stage. So it's the annexation criteria, broad brush criteria. What a lot of people want to know are the details, and that's not going to come till later.
Right, exactly. So to me, sometimes things can slip through the process if you are not aware of the details. You know, when you get down to the subdivision point, it seems to me that's where I see that the issues hit the ground, that you know there needs to be a certain place you need to not put that road. You know that there's a
counselor,
and that doesn't really get to be seen until you really get down to that development stage.
But counselor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but and someone tell me if I'm wrong here, but I feel like that's all right if we're all individually governor of the state of Oregon, and we have some direct power over land use laws, right? But we don't, and so as a result, you know, we lose our power. It feels like, and again, if I'm wrong and I'm reading this, you know, wrong, please let me know. But we lose our power as we get closer to the development stage. And when I mean by power, I mean our power to implement, you know, what our vision is. Or vision isn't for a certain piece of property that gets annexed in. And so the idea of this is just to provide ourselves with some assurances going in, you know, that that certain public facilities are going to be available. I do have some comments. I've been holding my counsel a little bit, but I do have one more question before I make those comments. And that is if we decide to move forward on this, the process, if we don't like it, it's the exact same process to like change our minds and go back, correct? It's just changing the ordinance.
Correct. You have to do just tee up another code change.
Right. And so I only say that, not that just, you know, code changes are easy, but, you know, I don't want to get overly dramatic, but, you know, extraordinary times call on extraordinary measures. And I grew up in this community. I talk about that often. And the community that I am raising my children in is not the same community that I grew up in. There's a lot of things that are the same. And there's a lot of reasons that I still love this community. But it's dramatically changing. And we see that in the rapid growth that's being thrusted upon us for a variety of reasons outside of our control. Geographic, tourism, economic, there's a variety of factors that lead into that. But the truth is that change is being thrusted upon us and rapid growth is being thrusted upon us. And so as leaders of this community, I believe strongly that we've got to begin to do our due diligence at the front end. Now, I've been listening to the conversation. I've been getting kind of the feeling, uh-oh, Stan, you might be a little bit of a swing vote. I know Bethany's probably thinking that over there as well. And it's why I've kind of, you know, pushed back and looked for a little bit of debate, because I really wanted and want to hear both sides. And I feel myself, you know, hearing the points of folks that I've been around growing up here of, you know, just what Councilor Peetzel's talking about. Folks that just want to annex in, where they're going to sit on, you know, nothing's going to happen for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And we don't want to put too much red tape in front of that process. And that does worry me. To that, though, extraordinary times calls on extraordinary measures. And I think that we have got to take more control over our community and our community's growth. As a council, we have got to get into the discussion heavily more at the front end. You know, I'm telling you, politically, you know, looking down the future, what this does is it makes every annexation a lot more of a community conversation. And that may, you know, that may make some people nervous, but darn it, that's what we need to be having right now. When you're growing this fast and things are changing like this and people care about this community to the degree that they do, we got to be having these discussions. As if anything over the last couple of weeks have taught us, is that dialogue is important. challenging each other is important, and we all care about this community. And I think we've got to start taking steps. We've got to recontrol the power and the vision of our destiny and the control of our destiny of a community. I think this is an important first step. Definitely want to talk about the clear cutting, the trees, definitely open to that conversation. Love the 1,000 feet requirement of notification. I think in addition to more power and control over our community's future, we're also trying to increase the transparency and communication level with our community. This is a huge night. I understand the concerns, and I believe the concerns are coming from very good, strong, smart places. But I think we should look at this as a major night in our community. Looking forward to take control of our community. If this is a mistake and we start hearing from people from some of the concerns that were brought up tonight, let's be nimble, let's be flexible. Let's always look to be better and to improve our systems. But darn it, guys, folks, we got to do this. I think we've got to start taking strong, strong steps towards more control over our future. I see hands from Councilor Schultz and then Councilor Lee, please.
Yeah, thanks. I think I've been sitting here listening to Councilors Peacehold and Exner. A lot of respect for your opinions. Obviously, you know a lot more about this than I do. But I do know when I first read this proposal, I got pretty excited about it because in my mind, it will help us with a lot of these issues that we just went through, and getting more of that kind of decision-making power or whatever you want to call it into our hands earlier feels like a good move to me, just again, based on what we've gone through already. So I agree with what Stan is saying, and I'm also willing to, again, really appreciate all the comments because you obviously are a wealth of information on this topic. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I feel like the gist of it is that this will give us a little bit more of a ability to not allow what just happened to happen again. So I guess that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Councilor Lee. Thank you, Councilor Schultz.
I strongly agree with you, Mayor, 100%, and also with Bethany. We need to be out front on this instead of behind like we just were. So I think what we have now would be very workable, what's proposed. If we find over time it's not workable, it's an ordinance and we can go back and change it. So I really support going forward with it at this time.
Thank you. Further discussion or motions? A question being back to my first time mayor excuse. I'm not seeing that we're going to have a unanimous decision on our first reading. That will then put us to our second reading. I guess I'm curious about councilor participation in the next meeting. I'm unaware of the rules, right? Are councilors able to participate going forward and voting if they didn't participate tonight? Does anybody know that?
I mean, I'll defer to our city attorney on the call. I believe they can, Mayor. I don't think there's any restriction on that.
Okay.
That's correct. It just has to be approved by the council at 2 readings. It doesn't have to be approved by the same councilors.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Exner.
In the past, if we've got somebody who's absent like this, we just ask that they review the video of the previous one so they're brought up to speed. That gives them a chance to know what they're discussing.
What I would suggest, and of course, not trying to stifle debate and comment, so if there's more of those, please. But if we do have a vote that moves forward past the first reading and we get to a second reading, just for counselors that might be a little nervous about the advancement of this, there should be recognition that we will be adding 2 more counselors into the debate next time, which I think we all want to hear from. Okay. And so I just also want to say I'm not going to be looking for a second reading tonight after our first reading, personally. Unless you're unanimous. With that, is there a motion or a comment? Question?
I would move the first reading, but I don't have the rest of the motion in front of me if more is required.
Jeff, would you read the first reading for us, please?
Yes, Mayor, this is Ordinance 2020-13, an ordinance amending Chapter 17.78 of the Sandy Municipal Code related to annexations.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councillor Lee, a second by Councillor Schultz. Jeff, will you do a roll call vote, please?
Councillor Pietzold.
No.
Councillor Lee.
Yes.
Councillor Exner.
No.
Councillor Schultz.
Yes.
Mayor Pulliam.
Yes.
That's 3 yeses and 2 nos.
Thank you. Motion carries. We will have to go to the second reading at our next meeting. With that, let me toggle back to our agenda.
Just a real short comment, Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm very willing to discuss this with Kelly and Emily or whoever might, some of my ideas, because I am very concerned about us getting another Barely Meadows again, and I want to make sure we don't get there again. But I'm very willing to talk out. Sometimes these video things don't always lend themselves well to getting the point out across. So if there's a chance, desire, I'd sure be willing to sit down and talk on the phone or whatever facility.
Well, I know I can speak for myself as someone who is one of the eyes, is I would very much appreciate dialogue between Councillor Exner, Pietzold, staff, anything that we could do to get something more amendable to concerns. I would be very much appreciative of.
Yeah, I'd love to have a conversation because I just can't support what I've read.
We could set up a Zoom call to do that.
Okay. Yeah, love to.
As I would just remind everyone, this is not quasi-judicial, so the ex parte rules don't apply. You can talk to whoever you want about this, but you still can't have a quorum of you in one place at the same time. So, thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, we'll move forward with a report from the city manager. Jordan.
Thank you, Mayor. An additional code change will be coming again this summer. Really shortly, I think next month. I think it goes to the Planning Commission first, but it'll be amendments to the subdivision criteria with those ADT standards. So that's another high priority item that is being worked on that will address some of these concerns. You're talking about subdivisions like Bailey Meadows. So report tonight, there was another protest, the Black Lives Matter protest in Sandy on Sunday, and it may be something that is reoccurring on Sundays or other days of the week. But personally, I think it's great. I think it's heartwarming to see that activity in Sandy and so many people coming out in our community and demonstrating for racial justice. So applause for the community for doing that. Our police department's done a great job of working with the organizers, and the organizers have been great about reaching out to city staff, asking about rules and regulations and doing it safely. So, we definitely appreciate that and of course their message. And just say, from the city of Sandy standpoint, I mean, we stand with all of those who are, grieving right now and seeking justice and demanding action to address, the systemic racism and injustices in our society. So, I think it's pretty important to recognize that as a city government, and especially with the police department, we have a role to play in this, in building a community and building a nation that is centered on justice, respect, and dignity. And those values are embedded in our personnel policies for everyone. And so, we call on the community to, keep us accountable, keep our police department accountable. We are a small town community policing focused department that, in their mission, those core values are true. And it's because this is a police department that a lot of our officers live here. They know the members of the community, they know their neighbors, they know a lot of the students in the school and the students' families and parents. And so it's more important than ever that we are held accountable, that we continue to be trained and stay up on all the best practices. So, I think this is a conversation that will continue. And again, we just appreciate the protest being peaceful and working with our police department and staff. Now, our COVID-19 update for the week. So the latest, as you've probably heard, that the Clackamas County is cautiously waiting for submitting to phase 2. You saw that, the Oregon numbers are going up. A lot of that is, due to increased testing and outbreaks in workplaces and unfortunately elder care. But at this point, the county commission is waiting this week before they apply for phase 2 and seeing where their numbers are. But at the same time, the governor has put a 7-day pause on movement for additional counties to move into phase 2. So, our status is currently the same as it has been. We're waiting to open our facilities to the public at phase 2, or once we get the barriers installed, which again, install will happen at the end of the month. So timing may be, coordinated with possible phase 2. Although we are still crossing our fingers that we'll see some improvement back in the numbers. I know the county is concerned with some of that trend that has been kind of reversed here in the last few weeks. And then, so I'm happy to answer any questions on where we're at with the coronavirus, but we did talk a little bit about it earlier in terms of our workplace and some of our future projections and things like that. But, we've talked about our plans for opening safely. We did have court on June 8th. Was just 3 trials, and it went very successfully. We do have temporary barriers, and we have our decals up and signage, so we were able to hold that trials in our courtroom in a safe manner. Councillor Lee and I attended the presentation of the Social Services Master Plan proposal by the PSU graduate student group, and we were very impressed. They did a lot of great work. I think the report that they shared with us, that the council will get a copy, is like 80 pages. So a lot of great work went into it. I met with them today and looking to schedule a presentation to the council. I think in the July work session, I think we might be able to fit it in there. So I think you'll be pleased to see the results of that work and what the recommendation will be for forming a task force for a strategic plan regarding social services in the community of Sandy, and some of the work that task force would then be charged with in terms of measures to help some important work here in the community. And then final note, I think you all received the notice from LOC that the conference will be virtual this year. It's not until October, so we have some time, but registration is, I think, just a month away. So, we don't have to worry about hotel logistics and all that. So it'll be a virtual conference this year.
not to interrupt and that you get these two. Did I miss the email? Did the mayor's conference get canceled this summer? I haven't seen anything.
I haven't either. Who's in charge of the mayor's conference?
Dude, I got to find out. Mackenzie will be ecstatic. But anyways, right.
The city manager's conference is gone. Will be virtual. That's in July. So that's about a month away. I'm a little bummed we don't get to go to Bend this year, but virtual conferences actually are pretty good. So happy to stay in town for that.
Sorry to interrupt, Jordan. I believe it is virtual this year, Mayor.
Oh, virtual. Okay.
And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilors, committee and councilor reports. Councilor Schultz.
Thanks. The library board met again this week. I did not get to attend. They had to have it earlier in the day, so I wasn't able to make it. But I did watch, and they were talking about their annual reports for the library district, funding. Tyler was there helping them go over their financial documents and questions about library finances. So thanks to Tyler for doing that. And the other big topic was reopening. Starting today, we are able to share materials between libraries and link at least the ones that are willing to. It sounded like most of them are maybe. So when you place a hold, you may be able to start getting holds that are housed in other libraries and not just in the Sandy library. which will be fantastic because I think we've read all of the ones there. They will not have public inside the library even once we hit phase 2. It sounds like they're going to hold off a little bit longer before actually opening the doors, but our curbside services are still going strong and doing well. Thank you to Carl and Stan for connecting Jan and I with Tony from the Trackers organization. He's working towards optimizing the Roslyn Lake campground for childcare purposes as we go into the summer and then a very uncertain school year in the fall. We've had some good emails back and forth about some creative measures that can be taken to help people out, because it's going to be rough if school doesn't open and parents got to go back to work. So we're connecting him with the Child Care Task Force and city staff as we move forward and try to help out and figure out as we go in this kind of crazy time. And then my last thing is I just wanted to let you guys know that I will probably not be running for re-election this year. I know, not completely.
Whatever. Come on. What about 16 years? Come on.
I love that got interrupted, as it should get interrupted.
Sorry.
I'm not completely decided, but I just don't want to be like, surprise. So it's not looking like I will, but you guys
surprise.
Are
I'm going to be passing around Bethany's number. I don't support peer pressure, but in this case, I don't know.
Wow. Bummer.
Yeah.
Well, you're telling me.
You did a great job, so still think about it. We may disagree, but you're doing a great job.
Thank you. Appreciate it. That's all I got.
Oh, what you got? Oh. You have more.
That was like mic drop.
The offer, darn it. Okay, Counselor Lee. No, Counselor Exner. Counselor Exner is the one that goes next. I'm all screwed up with the absences.
All right, we'll watch over you. Make sure we recognize we do know you screw up.
Yeah.
I also want to put my disappointment, Bethany. I think you do a great job and you keep us sharp because you do disagree, and I think that's good for us all. So, going to the next, Jordan, do we know? We have a garbage pickup cleanup day and all kinds of things that go with that. Do you know if there's any plans to do that, or are we going to stop that with the coronavirus too?
Yeah, I think they're not doing it this year. I don't know if they're going to do it at another time, but I remember that being, it's typically a spring time event.
Normally in April, May, they said they weren't doing it at that time because of coronavirus. They sent everything out, but never had word, like to Carl's point, of are they going to do that in the future or not. It was
maybe after phase 2 or something like that.
I know a lot of people have been asking, my wife included.
A lot of people are doing spring cleaning right now at home. Yeah, I hear you. I've heard the questions, but yeah, I remember
Can we ask?
Yeah, we can definitely ask.
Yeah, because it's a popular thing. I know lots of folks. We used to do even brush disposal in Mining Park parking lot. Those are good things to have for the city. Okay, so that's beside the point. We are going to do an interview process for the last art commissioner's seat this 16th. So I think that Laura's not going to make it, but I believe the other interviewers are going to be that way. So looking forward to get a full upgrade on that one. Great report is, I just got an email from Becky Hawley today. She says there's well over $1,000 already, and she just barely put the numbers out there and asked. So where donations are coming in, and I really appreciate that. Good support. People are already coming up with commercial donations as well as individual. So I don't know if you've all seen that or not, but there's a list of what you can do to support. I think it's really something that's going to pull the community together, at least in some degrees. I also appreciate the protests that happened this past couple of weeks. Not able to make it, personal things in conflict, but I do support everybody should have a life that matters, and certainly Black lives as well as brown lives and white lives. I think it's important for people to certainly be supportive of that, and I do. I think that's really a piece that needs to be taken care of and walked forward through. I have a short thing, and I apologize for making too much time, but I asked Jeff if I could do something with a share. Is there a chance of doing that now, make this happen? I don't know if I can do that or not. See if this will work. I am going to see if that will share. There it is. Okay. I think it was last fall, Kelly and I sat down in the backyard of, this is the Sandy Place apartment homes, the apartments that got put in here, 149 of them, I believe. If you're not familiar or don't remember, let me remind you, this is Sandy Heights, Bluff Street. We're talking about Colson and Hamilton Ridge development all here, and this is the 149 apartments. One of the things that happened toward the tail end of that development was that there was supposed to be in this small road, this little spur down here that my cursor's on, had a trail and a gate that was supposed to go down through this development so that people from this apartment could make it into the Hamilton Ridge playground, among other things. And through a number of things, decided that we weren't going to do that. So that gate has been closed off. And the discussion with all of these homeowners and with some of the developer as well was that in trade for that there might be a better place to put some of our time and their money and some of ours possibly to put in because there is a bus stop right here for the development and some of the adjacent houses. There's a piece of sidewalk in this little spot, about 30 feet or so, that's not in place. It's gravel. The kids have to walk out into the street if they're coming from this area to go up into the development. And one of the things we talked about, Kelly and I talked about, was find a way to support putting in some concrete in that. I believe they've contacted the house owner here and they've not gotten anything feedback, but what I'm hoping for is a way to get this a little bit better for our kids so they can get to this bus stop up here and relieve some of the pressure to have people from this side of the development apartments to go out down this direction and maybe go out this way and use sidewalk to get down to the Hamilton Ridge instead. So just something that I have been kind of motivated to bring up because I think it is important for us to look at maybe something we can support our kids with. And so it's a project that I think needs to be worked on. And I hope that I could get some support from council as we go through. Maybe I can get a little bit more time in a work shed or workshop place to be able to show this more.
So this would be a perfect example of a Clackamas County block grant. Have we looked at the block grant? We've done this in other places for exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Gordon, Kelly, anybody?
Yeah, that is a good idea. I mean, we did apply for the ADA ramps, and we have that project, and then also the improvements to the facilities for access. But
I don't believe it would qualify for a block grant or
what?
for. Are you talking about? I'm sorry, Jeremy. Are you talking about the grants that we apply for areas that are declared as lower income areas? The CBG grant fund. Yeah, I think we did look at this area, Mike and I, when we were applying last time. I don't believe the area qualified for that.
I was going to say Sandy Heights there and other locations of it has been part of that because Sandy Heights had been designated. Now I know it's got brand new apartment complex and maybe that's changed the qualification for or not. I don't know. But anyways, that was just a recommendation I had from past experience.
Just wanted to show real quick. This is what the last little bit of non-sidewalk is between current sidewalk and you go this direction to the apartments. And so it's definitely the kids have to walk out into the bike path, and it's something that I'm concerned about.
Yeah, the actual bus stop, I believe, as Carl, so not only the city bus stop for like the Star Bus, but I believe, Carl, correct me if I'm wrong on this, last time we were talking was so long ago, but I believe the actual bus stop that Oregon Trail drops all the kids off in Hamilton Ridge at is actually by the apartments. So all those kids are going out into the right of way to get back to their houses down there as well. It's not a good scenario.
Google Earth doesn't have the new development in there, but the bus stop for all those kids is way up in this direction. So this is all sidewalk now, and all these houses are gone, and just it's a matter of already sidewalked. But anyway, I wanted to bring that to your attention, and maybe I can figure out a way to convince Mayor and Jordan to be able to put that on a workshop sometime.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. That's it. And I'll unshare this somehow, and forgive me if it takes me a minute or two here.
No problem. While he's doing that, Councilor Lee, you will be the next one up.
There. Jeff maybe or somebody.
I took care of it.
Oh, are you finished, Carl?
I'm done. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, I join you all in urging Bethany to stay with us if she can. I value her opinions, but I also respect her family life and what she needs to do. So we'll see how that turns out. We have a transit meeting coming up this Wednesday night. C4 has been talking about transit and bringing together the various rural and urban systems to make one united system. And to add to that, Congressman DeFazio has now supported a bill in Congress which would not only pay for some of the transit costs for the states, but also roadway work, et cetera. It's a really big bill, and we'll see where that goes in Congress. The other thing that's been going on at C4 is the climate action plan the county is putting together. They put the RFP out, and that will be awarded in early July. And the plan should be done by January of 2022. At this last meeting in June, the cities discussed how they would coordinate with the county, and there seemed to be a lot of enthusiasm to do that. So we're working on details of how that will come together. Some of the cities, I think it was Milwaukee and Lake Oswego, already have climate action plans that could be coordinated with the county. Those cities that are in the metro boundaries can get financial help to develop their plans to coordinate. Unfortunately, we are outside those boundaries. We were told that we were one of the top cities in the cohort that Geoscience or GeoS Institute was going to try to fund. They've gone through a couple of their funders and still have 3 more to address. So we have not been told that we have the finance yet, even though we've been approved to be in the cohort. So we're looking at what we can do in the meantime with our local resiliency plan, just within the internal workings of the city, trying to prepare so we could do the broader community plan when the funding pops up. The county also put out a greenhouse gas study that some of you may have seen. If not, Jordan can share that, but it talks about what Sandy's potential limitation might be, and it also goes through some of the different kinds of emissions and sets some standards in regard to how much emissions. So we'll be able to use some of that in our resiliency plan. It'll be a good tool for us. Basically, that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Peetzold.
I guess I am up next since 2 counselors are missing right next to me. Caught me by surprise. First off, I want to thank Councilor Lee. I did watch the session there with the county commissioners and representing Sandy. You did a great, amazing job, and you were spot on, and you do a very good job of communicating for us. So I appreciate that, and thank you for taking the time to do that. I did, it was mentioned maybe in an email from Friday or whatever, the mayor and I sat in on a business that landowner in the C1 area that wants to look at redeveloping some land, and in pretty fun, amazing things that we've always dreamt about, plans going forward. That they had done this I didn't know this a couple of years ago, and we're just bringing it back. And I asked them, you know, if the parking standards that we had just recently changed had any influence on them wanting to, you know, re-engage with the city. And they said absolutely, and that was probably one of the number one reasons is because of that in that area. And so no, don't know much more about what they're going to do or anything like that, and you know, won't have any more contact with them on that. But you know, they're just reaching out to the city after those standards had changed, and that I think we were moving in the right direction for that, and hopefully we'll see the benefit from that early on and for the long time to come. There was a grant program by the feds, and actually there was another one by the state of Oregon for broadband. And so for that, on to Jordan and Greg and about applying and reaching out to those people on that from people from DC that we had communicated with. Joe and I did years ago, almost 10 years ago, actually, when we were starting to do our fiber project stuff here in Sandy that helped us along the way. So we've always been kind of one of their favorite go-to people with SandyNet and fiber. So they were letting us know about this grant process to maybe expand and for more of our community around us, which will be great because during this time, there's a lot of rural area around Sandy that calls Sandy home, right? They believe they live in Sandy even though they just have a Sandy zip code or right outside. I mean, my parents, 4 miles down the road, they live in Boring, but they keep on reminding me, Jeremy, that they are Sandy residents and they are people of Sandy, and we should, you know, help them out in different ways because they're part of Sandy, even though they're 4 miles out. But in this pandemic, we haven't been able to do a lot of things, and schooling is one of them, and work is another. And it's really put a burden on some of those people that don't have that benefit that we have inside the city of Sandy. And we are so amazingly blessed in that, you know, finding this grant program, I believe there'll be some more that if we are able to be successful in that, would just help those people out and be able to expand that and help the city itself in that. And then speaking of schools, I had the email. You guys maybe, I believe, all got that for last Wednesday, I think it was. I think it was Wednesday. It was the governor was announcing the plans for school going back in next fall. And I don't know if anybody else watched that. I got some shaking of heads. So if you watch the commentary on the side, that was quite, it was like cable TV. But you know, the plans going forward isn't really laid out, and they don't know in a ways. It was like, you're gonna have to have options for all three. And this is going statewide. So, I mean, I'm not speaking for Oregon Trail and our school district here. I've heard some thinking that they've had, but I don't know what they've come out with. And that's okay, because I don't think anybody in the state under education has a real focus, because it was the plan for all three. And if something happens in the middle of that. So the thing they did say they would bring out more guidance in 3 weeks, and then 3 weeks after that, and 3 weeks after that. So as we go forward, all I did get out of the tea leaves in the listening to that was that it won't be the same as what it was last year, and what it will look like will be different. And it'll be up to a lot of the school districts to make those decisions in guidance or in direction from the local health authorities of the county. And so they will be the ones that are determining that, or helping them determine that for that issue, and that during the year that could all change because of an outbreak or someone getting sick in those facilities, and then everyone having to evolve and change. So, but again, those guidance will be updated every 3 weeks throughout the summer. So anyways, more to come, I guess, on that, like everything else with COVID and the release of that. But so anyways, that's all I have. It's sure nice. I have to say this. I've been out to eat several times, and it has been really nice to go out to restaurants, especially on sunny days. So I'm sure no one was out today eating lunch or dinner in this rain, But when it hasn't been, I mentioned before we started, going down to Smoky Hearth, and not to throw any business out there over another, I thought the theater was open because half the parking lot was full, but they had increased the size of their parking lot seating to have more distance socialing in that. And I would highly recommend for people like that and other businesses, restaurants that do have outdoor seating to be allowed to expand that area farther, to take up more parking spaces so they won't have as many customers if that's what they're concerned about. The others is it's a great way for a community to get out on these 5 summer days throughout the summer and enjoy the weather. I know Red Shed, been up there, out sitting outside, and it's just the community and being able to feel a little bit about being normal again, on your date or family or whoever you're taking out there. So anyways, I just encourage maybe the city in allowing more space to be consumed during this summertime. That's all.
All right. Thank you, Counselor. Just a couple of comments. Well, I mean, so first of all, I want to start by saying there's a long time until January. And so this council still has a lot to finish and do. And so I'm not going to let anybody off the hook until January. That said, since Councilor Hamlin made his comment about not running for re-election, I started to spend time thinking about, us as a council, what we've accomplished, and then the end of the road with our, you guys are my first council as mayor. Now with Bethany said tonight, I now know I won't make it through that final meeting with, you're all going to learn what crier the mayor is. So we'll just have to take that on when that comes. But I talk way too much, and I'll talk way too much on that day. But I do want you to know, Counselor, I've been so just proud just watching you join this council from day one, and then how you've tackled the issues and jumped in, and you've agreed and you've disagreed, and you got involved and you asked the hard questions and you participated, and then your leadership with childcare, Tony and trackers, and talking to him about the things that he wants to do. I mean, that stuff gets on the radar because of your leadership, right, and your work. So, if you don't run for re-election, totally get it. But the year and a half that you've spent and will continue to spend away from your family and stuff, you've just did a great job. So, wanted you to know that. Councilor Lee, wanted to thank you for your, see, look at that. See, imagine what I'm going to be like on that last day. Councilor Lee, want to thank you for participating on the annexation deal with the county commission. I agree. You did a great job. Councilor Exner, great idea on the parks. I think we need to definitely have a work session on that in the future and talk about it. Mentioned trackers, awesome. What a great community organization. Great opportunity there. There's several great opportunities with that organization that we look forward to, and just wanted to thank them publicly for thinking outside the box and just wanting to have the conversation about how to be an effective leader for change in childcare here in our community. It's very much needed. On the Tura family, the meeting that Councilor Peetzold talked about earlier, and he mentioned a couple of things actually that I want to bring up, because it goes back to this council and the terrific story that we have to tell. He said two things, right? And we as councilors have taken heat from certain members of this community that I think have kind of mischaracterized some of the things that our council has been really striving to do. And this is a perfect example. Local family, local establishment that wants to put together a development project that when that comes to fruition, we're going to have, it's going to be pleasant, literally. It's going to interact with Pleasant Street if it goes through. It's going to have tremendous opportunities for our community. It's going to be something that we're going to be very proud of, right? And so that's what that's all about. And then he went on and he mentioned the patios. Well, Smoky Hearth ain't paying the city of Sandy another dime for any of those seats. And the reason for that is because we wiped out our SDCs to allow additional patio seating for our local establishments. So those are two pro-business friendly, I call it local small business friendly. Those are two local families and businesses, to Councilor Peetzold's point, that offer outstanding services to our community that are just going to be enhanced because of some of the things that this council is doing. You know, we're going into election season, and I have the capacity to tell this story. and I'm extremely excited to do it and to tell all of your guys' story for what we've accomplished. Wanted to say some words on the protests. I've had several mayors, different community members, people from around the state have reached out to me about what they've witnessed and just what a terrific community the city of Sandy is. When you look at our demonstrations and our peaceful protests, in which I know all of us share in the outrage, because Black lives absolutely do matter. The murder that we all witnessed of George Floyd is outrageous. We have more dialogue and action that needs to happen to watch for community members in the peaceful way that they did that. And then the community members that turned out that don't necessarily agree with all of the objectives of the folks that, or feelings that the folks came out to protest, and how they conducted themselves. What an extraordinary place to live. And it really just says everything that we know about, what a special place Sandy is. And talking about special, I want to mention our police department. We've been kind of not hit, but it's been talked about, some counselors not attending the protests. I think all of us we've had a discussion about maybe having a work session down the road where we increase dialogue, bring in Chief Roberts to talk about some community policing and some of the different things, questions that we might just have that we would have never even thought to have asked before some of the national debate and dialogue going on. So let's have that dialogue, and let's have a public comment portion, which of course we have at every meeting, and hear what our community members have to say and then ask those hard questions. I think that could be a very important exercise for our community. But we're extraordinarily proud of our police and our police officers here in Sandy. Their community policing efforts have been outstanding. Their efforts when working with the protesters to show the level of service that they do. And defund the police. If anything, this mayor wants to reprioritize our public police officers and to give more funding to our police department. One of the first things our council did, I'm just talking about our council, is the public safety fee. I still believe in that fee, and I think that we need to get even more funding into our public safety department. I feel it's that important for the future of our community. And then on the last item, and I'm going to look for a little bit of feedback from council on, is Jordan and I did get some outreach from the governor's office today. I need to get back to her office by close of business tomorrow on just how we want to communicate 4th of July activities in our community. It was a suggestion of social distancing guidelines, masks, all those proper things that I think we've all come accustomed to or more accustomed to during this pandemic. What I'd like to, unless a counselor disagrees, I was going to look to kind of coordinate with Jordan and what his conversations with Chief Roberts have been, as far as just the practices that we're going to wanting to put into place for our 4th of July activities, and just ask the governor and her office's communication to reiterate those points. That's what I would look to do. I'll take your, yeah.
I would think too that we could do some analysis of our fireworks. Lots of times the fireworks may blow them off, or some of the displays are relatively low, but if we're expecting to have more dispersal, more distancing, if we could spend more of our energies, our monies, Clackamas County Bank's monies, on higher up elevation type of fireworks too, as well as dispersal of our people and asking them to distance themselves.
Okay.
Sorry, Mayor, I didn't get that communication from the governor's office.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll forward it to you. It was you and David Snyder were copied on there, which, anyways, yeah.
Maybe I went with the spam filter. No,
yeah.
No, I didn't get that. We did talk with David Doofman about this too, and how we can hold this event in a way that doesn't violate the governor's orders on mass gatherings, and some of it has to do with, this is not going to be an event in the sense of, festivals and places to gather and things like that. This is a show that we're putting on at a location, and people are welcome to come and watch in areas that, lend themselves to proper distancing. And of course, telling people to, perhaps stay in their cars or maintain, distance and watch with their own family units, consider wearing masks and things like that. So I'll look for that. Thank you. And see how we can respond or make sure we comply.
Mayor, I apologize. If it's okay, I think Tyler has something to add, but he wasn't a panelist. I just promoted him.
Well, congratulations on the recent promotion to Tyler.
Yay. Sorry, I've been watching silently from the background as my children sleep and newborn is not screaming. So I'm just jumping in last minute here. But Councilor Exeter brought up, perhaps different firework display, so that social distancing could be more enforced. Unfortunately, the firework display was purchased prior to the pandemic, and the shells that we've ordered are on a boat already, probably already in the States now, and there's not an option to change the show at this point in the game. And also just another point of clarification that the city is sponsoring this show this year, that we do not have an outside sponsor. So it would be our funds paying for that if we had the opportunity to change the show.
Great, thank you.
Uh-oh. I hear a crying baby.
Yeah, it didn't last long, did
it? Thanks, Tyler. Well, that's the end of my report. Well, wow, we did it before 10 p.m. Council. We should stand tall. All right, thank you, everybody. Have a nice evening, and we'll see you next time.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.